March 11th at 7 o'clock at the Greenwood Center, specifically at the Over 60 room. So if you go in the side entrance, that's where we'll be March 11th at 7 o'clock, and everyone's welcome. Now, if we have any resident comments, please come to the microphone. And yes, that's you.
Over here?
Yes. State your name and where you live, and what is your petition you've been speaking about?
Hello, everybody. My name's Anthony Aviard, and I'm here tonight, 286 Hopkins. I'm here tonight because I think there's a street in town that could really use some sidewalks. Yeah. So I'll read my petition. Petition for Linwood Drive sidewalk installation. Linwood Drive urgently needs a sidewalk installed for safety reasons. It's become an increasingly dangerous road for the pedestrians due to its use as a cut-through between two major arteries, Bliss and Williams. Linwood has become a handy way for commuters to bypass the traffic lights that are located on these heavily traveled roads. Children are especially at risk due to Linwood's proximity to both Williams Middle School and Blueberry Hill Elementary School. Also, the northern end of the street is situated directly across from an entrance to Bliss Park Playground. Safety is also compromised by the fact that the road is fairly long and straight and conducive to increased vehicle speeds. Adding a sidewalk is a safety precaution that is long overdue. In addition, I believe that one other connecting street to Linwood should be considered for sidewalk placement, Hopkins Place. Although most of Hopkins Place does currently have a sidewalk, the section that connects to Linwood and subsequently gets most of the traffic does not. I've spoken with many of the abutters on both of these streets, and the consensus is that sidewalks are badly needed. I've also spoken with the DPW's Yem Lip, who confirmed that the street's residents have on multiple occasions expressed their safety concerns regarding the lack of sidewalks. Linwood Drive can be a hazard to foot traffic even in fair weather conditions. But when wintry conditions hit, it becomes an especially treacherous place for residents traveling on foot. On multiple occasions, I've personally witnessed vehicles passing dangerously close to children. I encourage the town to act as swiftly and proactively as possible to help prevent an avoidable and tragic accident from occurring in this increasingly well-traveled area. And that's it.
Thank you very much. And I understand you've also given your petition, and some people have spoken to the town manager.
Well, that's unrelated.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Oh, I thought it was
Yeah.
related to this.
No. When I spoke to, and I'm sure I'm brutalizing his name here, Yem Lip, he did tell me that there's been more than a few occasions where people have contacted me about it, or contacted him about it, yeah, so.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Usually we don't ask questions, but since we're select board comments is coming
Oh,
right
I
up, go
thought this
ahead.
was, I didn't think this was just on comments, I thought it was an actual petition. Have you received any type of pricing from Yam? Did he give you any estimates?
No, as a matter of fact, today was the first day I spoke with him. There was somebody else that was in charge over there that's on leave or for some medical type of thing. I don't know that he's the person I would be speaking to about it, but I did have a question, and pretty basic one. Now that I've presented this, what's the next step as far as I go?
Well, as far as deliberation on the board, we would have to put it on the agenda, and you've given it to the town manager, and so that would be an important step. And so when you see it on the agenda, we'd be able to deliberate and discuss it further.
Okay. Mr. Lip did mention that because it was the proximity to the schools, it was something where, because the kids, it's a route to school, there's some type of state funds that might be available. Again, something to do with school routes and safety.
Well, I know that, yeah, there are possible funding. I'm not sure where that would tie in, but we could discuss that when we get it on the agenda.
And lastly, not to take up too much of your time, but as far as the funding goes, I understand the fiscal year is already wound down. It's
Well,
not
actually-
something that could be done.
It
We're
could be
talking-
done, it could be done in the context of the capital plan, which is still being finalized as a part of the budget process.
Okay. All right, well, thanks all you.
Thank you very much for coming.
Could I ask him a question?
Oh, did you have a question also?
No, I've run down that road because the 5K in May usually goes down Linwood, but is there no sidewalk on either side of the street?
There isn't.
Okay.
And another factor is the road is a little bit narrower than, I don't think it was ever designed to be, what it turned into. Kind of like, I'm sure Burbank was probably the same way years ago where, it was used but not constant traffic back and forth, and eventually sidewalks were put in. But like I said, on more than a few occasions, I've been driving and I've heard stories from other people and other parents where cars are becoming in two different directions, and the kids, of course, are not paying attention, and luckily one of the other drivers isn't in as much of a hurry. They slow down, and luckily, catastrophe's been averted. But it's really a dangerous. As far as all the streets I know of, and before I moved to Hopkins, I've only been there a few years. I've been in town for about 10. I too used to use it for a cut through, and so I'm not pointing fingers at people for trying to beat a light or two, but as you can see on that map I gave you, it's pretty clear why people are taking Linwood.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Any select board comments? No? Oh, yes,
You just made an announcement that we have a budget forum on the 13th of March.
11th.
Or 11th of March,
Yeah.
and I actually went and saw it on the town website today that said the select board has set a date. And I don't recall the board setting a date for a budget forum. And I think that's something, before it's unilaterally done, that we actually find out whether I'm not available. And I would prefer that, in the past, what we've done is have our budget forums either on a Wednesday or during our meeting, on a Monday meeting, such as the school committee just did, where this past couple weeks ago, where they actually had their budget forum, then they had the meeting to discuss their budget. So I don't know who voted for that. I don't think that was part of the original budget calendar on March 11th. And I would just ask that the board have this on the agenda, slip it in where we can have a discussion as to who's available, when, and where. But it said on the website that the select board decided, or the select board has called a budget forum, and I know I haven't missed the
Well,
meeting.
Paul, I did send out the list of meetings that were coming up the following week. I asked where people had problems with the meetings, and I didn't get a response from anyone saying that they had trouble with the 11th. I did try to pick the 11th in regards to a date in which we could have that before we really delved into the budget, because it's important for the public forum to occur before then. And we were also counting back on the days in which we needed to have the budget in the hands of the finance committee. So the schedule that we did have was, we're staying on the budget schedule according to what we did before.
I'd like to
So
have
I'm
the board
sorry you did
discuss
not get
this.
back to me.
First of all, I don't think I saw your email with the 11th for the budget forum,
Mm-hmm.
so I think it's a point of discussion, Marie, that you cannot set a meeting for the board on a budget forum where you're saying the select board set it. It is a select board budget forum, not a chair's budget forum.
And so you're saying you're not available the 11th, you're available the 12th?
I'm not saying I'm available on the 12th either. I want to know when this board has time to meet. Secondly, when you talk about the budget calendar, you want this board to vote on the budget by March 17th, so that the finance committee can have it. They need to have it 30 days prior to town meeting, which is April 13th. So the intent is to have this board discuss the budget for 17 days, because we just got the budget on the 28th. And the finance committee will actually have it longer than the select board, which makes no sense to me. And I think that you're trying to rush through the budget where we have two meetings set up to talk about the budget itself. Tonight's a budget presentation. Typically, in a town manager's presentation, there really isn't a lot of questions because the town manager is presenting the budget to the board for the first time. There might be some clarifications, but then we have two scheduled meetings, I believe.
We have 3 scheduled meetings, and I have left that area in case we needed more time. So the aim was to get it done the 17th. If we didn't get it done the 17th, we need a little extra room in order to get it to the...
Was that in your email, that the aim
Yes.
was to get it done the 17th?
Yes.
No, it said to vote on the budget.
A tentative vote.
That's not-
The
that seems
issue
so
is, if
tentative.
you weren't available the 11th, you very well could have sent the email back saying, I'm not available on the 11th.
Send me the email, because I didn't get it with all the
I
dates.
will follow up on the email. Now, what days are you available? Because the problem is, we need to get this out in a timely manner to the residents.
I said it to you before, I
Mm-hmm.
set aside every Monday night of every week is available. Every
All
Monday
right, well,
night.
we have the budget schedule down later in the evening. We will look at that and see if we need to change that.
Right.
Yeah.
On the same point, I mean, I guess I should say related point. I noticed we're having the forum before a series of dates where we're gonna be reviewing the budget, and I guess so
Well,
It-
actually,
it's
if
a
we're
little-
going to talk about the budget schedule, we have that down as item 5.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
I-
so it's
but
just
it-
comments now. You have-
fine, well, it would just seem to fit precisely with what he was talking about, but if you wanna put it off, that's fine.
Okay. Now, on the minutes, the 21st, is there a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes for January 21st?
I have many corrections to these minutes. Before I make a motion, I don't know how, if you want a motion and then go through one.
Motion, then we'll go through it.
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes of January 21st, subject to amendments that are likely to be offered.
Oh, okay, and any corrections or amendments?
Yep. I start at the top, old business. I think it's first sentence. Maybe it's grammar, but Mr. Santinello didn't motion. He made a motion, or he moved. Mr. Gold seconded the motion. I didn't second.
Oh, you didn't?
Well, I did, but it should say I seconded the motion. It just says
Okay.
Mr. Gold seconded. It says the preliminary date, and it wasn't the date of the motion, it's the preliminary election date, was set for May 6th. If a preliminary election is needed, it sounded like it was setting the election date. Again, Mr. Santinello moved to set the date. I think it says that Mr. Gold announced, and I didn't make an announcement, that's in fact the case. I did note, however, that the following offices will be contested in the annual town election. And moving down to new business, again, Mr. Foster moved to approve the draft. I think we ought to indicate that the discussion took place before the motion and that the motion passed 4-0, as opposed to the vote occurring before the discussion. It says Mr. Santinello seconded. It said there was a motion before then. The fifth line down, the general reserve fund, free cash, and the stabilization fund. Mr. Pasturzik stated the definition of the general reserve fund is free cash and the stabilization fund. I think Mr. Pasturzik stated that the balance was declining. And I don't think it's an indicator that we're having trouble with our budgeting. I don't think he said it was a trouble with our budgeting. I think he said it was an indication that we were having, we were using money from non-recurring sources, but he didn't say we were having trouble with our budgeting.
Where are you saying that he said that?
Well, it's in the fifth line down under new business. It says
Oh, I
Mr.
see.
Pasturzik
I see.
stated the balance is declining and it is an indication that we are having some trouble with our budgeting. I don't think he said that, because it's not an indication we're having trouble with our budgeting.
With the use of free cash. How are you going to amend that line?
I don't know, but I think somebody's got to suggest something, because I know that's not what Paul Pasturzik said.
I think what that was, I don't think Paul said that. It was in the definition of free cash as part of, it was part of the policy, if you recall what we were discussing.
So should we look to strike the line, the trend is an indicator we're having trouble with our budgeting?
Mark, that description was in the general reserve policy, which said that a sign of diminishing free cash is a sign of budgeting, a trouble with, so the policy stated that.
Okay.
And then in the next line where it says you agree with my term of free cash is, we were talking about that it didn't mean that. But that's the policy. Paul didn't say it, but it was in the policy.
Okay. So then it ought to say that the policy said it.
Although he's the one who delivered the policy, so maybe, no. So, but my point was, that's what we were discussing,
Fine.
is that's what defined, it was in the definition of the policy.
So what is the correction we're looking to make on that line?
I have no.
I think, I don't know, it was it was the descriptor of the policy that stated the balances of a decline in balance is an indication we're having trouble. So it was the
policy
descriptor of the
states.
policy. Yeah, descriptor of the policy.
The policy states the trend is an indicator.
Right, and that's,
Okay. So-
unfortunately, the ensuing conversation was just the 2 lines, but basically, I think we struck that out of there.
Yeah.
And I think that's what should be,
So what is the correction we should be placing there? The policy states, or strike that line?
The policy stated, because the next one said, Mr. Gold moved to amend the term free cash under, and I think that's,
yeah.
because I did move to
The previous policy stated?
the draft policy
The
stated.
draft stop policy. Okay, so the correction would be the draft policy stated. What's the next?
That I moved to amend the term.
Moved, rather than motion. Moved, okay.
I also would think, that if you go under the town manager's report,
Mhm.
the second line down, it said that Mr. Crane gave a presentation and overview on each department of the Department of Public Works. I think he did it on each activity or each sub-department. I don't know what it is, but I don't think, is that considered a department?
Division.
Each division?
Division. So instead of department, the term would be division?
Division?
Anything else?
Yeah, under asset management.
Okay, page 2, asset management.
The DPW will be implementing a cartographic work management system to manage work orders and projects more efficiently. I think it's $1 million, not 1 million, has been requested.
Well, many dollars, okay.
That's my list.
Any other changes?
I guess if
Yep.
we're gonna, well, I can't make a change. I could recommend though, it should facility improvements.
For facility improvements?
That would be my recommendation.
Okay. Any other changes?
Yeah. Further, under Select Board comments on DPW presentation, it said, Mr. Santinello discussed the breaks taken by DPW workers. I believe it was the town manager who brought that up, because the next line says, Mr. Crane, we opened negotiations for the afternoon breaks. I know we had a discussion, and I was part of it, but I'm not the one who brought that subject up.
And what line is that?
2/3 of the way down, under Select Board comments on DPW.
Oh, here.
It's right after the line, it says, Mrs. Angeles will add this topic to an agenda for review, and it says, Mr. Santinello discussed the breaks taken by DPW workers.
Noted the section of the report.
I wasn't the one who opened the discussions of the breaks taken by DPW, and I wasn't the only one who participated in that discussion, but I did ask a question about it.
So should we say Mr. Santillan asked a question about the breaks?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I certainly didn't discuss it.
Any other changes? Okay. Any other discussion on these? All those in favor of the amended? Opposed?
I'm abstaining.
Abstain, okay. 1:21, regular meeting. All right, the next one is the regular meeting on 2/3. Any,
I have some comments, but
or do I have a motion?
Yeah.
Okay, Richard, and then a second
Second.
What's the motion?
to
To get-
approve the minutes.
Get the minutes on for approval so you can go into discussion.
Fine, as long as the minutes approve it subject to changes.
And any changes or amendments?
I have a few.
Okay.
I think that, under select board comments, I think we need to clarify, it said that the select board discussed the 240-page brief. I think that it ought to be prefaced by Ms. Angeles reviewed the Mass Gaming Commission hearing that was held. I think that the select board discussed the 240-page brief that was prepared. I mean, it's fine, but you can do what you want to.
Okay, so you're saying,
It also is written presuming that, I mean, from a time point of view, this was written before the MGC ruled, and it's written as if we already had been designated. The fourth line down, it says the 30-day negotiation will occur. It will only occur if the town is designated a surrounding community.
Okay.
At the town this was written.
okay,
Time
will
is
occur
different. If the town is designated a
if town
surrounding.
is designated.
It says the deadline for everything. I don't have a clue what everything is, but if the deadline for everything is May 30th, everything includes an awful lot of stuff, Marie. It needs
Okay.
to be more specific. And I don't know how to put that. I think the minutes are difficult in that to understand there.
Okay. Well, let me review these, and we can move those off to the next meeting. Can we have
I don't
those
know, there's-
tabled?
Sure. Motion to table.
I have well, the other thing, if we're going to talk about those minutes, it says that Rebecca Townsend was present here, select board response to a letter sent out by Roger Wojcik et al. And my question is, actually, the change should be that it was the chair who brought up that letter and read the letter during correspondence, because I don't know when we cite people sitting in the audience for correspondence they sent in, but that has to be adjusted as well, because that is not accurate. The letter was read by the chair, not during select board comments,
Okay, I will.
right? I mean, it was different, correspondence was,
All right,
different
I'll
agenda
review
item.
that.
How do you want to go about, I have a bunch more, Marie. I don't know how
Oh, you
you
do?
want to go about, yeah, I've got a,
Okay, well, then we will,
well, I mean, we can defer this and I can send them to Debbie House and have them all we can all do that and have them reissued, or how do you want, I don't know how you want.
yeah, why don't we send those in to Debbie, and these were done by Debbie
No, I don't
or
think
Jackie?
so.
Okay, why
I
don't
don't know,
we,
wherever you want me to send them, we'll send them.
why don't you send them to me, and then I'll review them and send them on to Jackie.
Yeah,
and
it
sit
doesn't,
down with her.
and that's the other thing, it doesn't say who took the minutes at the bottom.
All right, let's go, these will be tabled, and the 2-4 special meeting. Is there a motion? Oh, Richard? Okay. Second?
Second.
Okay,
And I have some comments on this.
okay.
Line 1 under budget, it says, Mr. Pisturza gave an overview on the free cash general reserve fund and water enterprise. It should say water enterprise fund.
Fund, mhm.
Mr. Pisturza feels the budget is a little below. I'm not sure what it's below, but somebody needs to fill that in. Free cash,
Would that be below levy limit? Revenue projections, okay.
free cash fund was not certified at a very high amount.
We should say what the amount is?
Well, it should say, I mean, that's such a relative term.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm, it's just not precise enough, I guess, Marie, is my concern. It doesn't indicate what was actually said.
I don't know, my recollection was that Paul said something like that. I mean, it was kind of I think he was kind of describing it qualitatively.
Okay,
Fine, if people are happy with it being at a high amount, that's fine. I mean, down, two lines down, it says, the increase in water shows the deficit. The increase in water rate shows the deficit, and I don't think the rate shows a deficit. The increase in water rate might be a cause for the deficit, might have been the causal factor for the increase in water rate as charged by the city of Springfield, which is, I think, what it was. But the rate didn't show a deficit.
And what's the next one?
Go down to the, under miscellaneous revenue, the second sentence, some money may have to go back to the MSBA. Mr. Sturzik added overall, the budget is $445,000 in excess. And I don't think the budget is
No, it's
in
an
excess of anything.
Right.
I think the expenditures are $445,000 above our budgeted expenditures. Or, but they're, okay. School department currently, what is it, how does it read currently? Because I've adjusted.
The school
So the
department-
currently has a $692,000 surplus at this time. I think the school department may have big budgets, but the key is what I think Mr. Pasturzik intended to say is the school department is currently projected to end the year with a $600,000 to $692,000 surplus. As opposed to, I mean, because right now they got a lot more than that as a surplus that they haven't spent. Line below that, it's not cherry fund, it's cherry sheet, I believe. Two lines down, the projected revenue for next year is approximately $240,000.
Yeah.
I have no
it's-
idea what that refers to.
Okay. And
So
what's the next one?
Yeah, the budget line is out of line. I don't think the budget line is out of line unless he printed it crookedly. It's out of balance.
Yeah, but that could have been his words. But
No. Yeah. I think Mr. Gold recommended modifying the medical benefit line item of the budget. I didn't recommend modifying the budget. I recommended modifying the medical benefit line item of the budget. Item 2 there. I don't think we voted to add a vacancy to the school committee. We voted to add an election to fill the vacancy on the school committee.
I'd rather see that stand.
Those are my corrections.
Okay. Any other corrections?
Those are them.
Okay, I think that I need to make some other changes and review some of those things that you mentioned, so can we have these also tabled? Okay, thank you.
You want to just table the next ones too?
Yeah, so I'll start with these two, and we'll move on to the next. If you could hand these that were, those changes that are approved down for Jackie, and then I'll sit down, especially some of these I need to talk to Paul Pasturzik and make sure we've got the corrections in these. So, I wanted to, we'll move on, and let me see, I want to mark that these are the two that I need to, so it was 2-3 and 2-4.
But we ought to look at 2.6 and 2.18 as well, Maureen.
Yeah, since
And
we're
I have a
here.
bunch of corrections for those too.
Okay, so let's go to 2-6.
I
And
mean,
for
you
some
want me to
reason,
go
I'm
through
missing
those, or-
that. Yeah, go ahead
I mean,
and
it's a
start.
short, the minutes are only.
Oh, that's why I'm looking at the wrong one. Yeah, 2-6. What's on there that we need to look at? Is there a motion?
Yes.
And
Second.
second, okay.
And there's a motion to table in advance.
Okay, what do you have, Mark?
Attorney Moss gave the update to the casino process. The town of Long Meadow has submitted a petition. I think it's submitted a petition requesting surrounding community designation. I think you ought to say that. Move down to the fifth sentence, the sixth line.
1, 2. Okay,
Mr. Grant made a motion to have Attorney Moss call the attorney for the MGM. My records say that there was no second for this motion, and it should be indicated as such.
okay.
And my motion was to have a phone call placed to Michael Matthias. Michael Mathis, actually. That's
Well,
not-
actually, the motion was to have,
No, the first motion was to have a phone call placed.
You're right.
The second motion, and that vote passed 5-0.
Mhm.
And that's incorrect, the way it shows the vote.
Mhm.
Okay, right? Then I made a motion that, I wrote it this way, Mr. Gold made a motion that he, Marie Angelides, and Town Manager Stephen Crane would make the call to Michael Mathis. I think it's Mathis and not Matthias, in both cases, isn't his name Mathis?
So, Mark, on the previous one, your notes indicate that the vote was 5-0, because it also indicates Mr. Grant opposed.
Yeah, Mr. Grant did not oppose that one, that's correct.
Okay, so it should be 5-0?
It was 5-0. And the second the vote passed 3-1.
Mhm.
Mr. Grant opposed and Mr. Foster abstained.
Any other changes to that? No? Well, then all those in favor? 4-0. Okay, 5. All right, so we have that one, and so let's move on and finish this up then on the 218. Is there a motion?
Make a motion.
So
to-
moved.
There you go, you got 'em.
Want to go through this one again?
Yes. And that way I'll have specifically what I'm working on.
Select Board comments. Mr. Gold thanked the residents and police department for their diligence in helping to bring about an arrest in the recent car break-ins. I didn't thank the residents for the recent car break-ins.
Anything else?
Yes, new business, Section 3 ambulance rates.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it said that a memo from Chief Madison was reviewed. He's asking for adjustments to the ambulance rate so that fees raised from our ENT services will continue to sustain the ambulance program, not so that it can sustain itself.
Actually, I thought we were raising the rates to make sure we cover the cost of the Medicare increase.
No, it was to,
That's right.
it was to reflect the Medicare increase.
And if we're staying in that section, it says, I question the increase, if the increase would cover the real expenses of operating the ambulance. What I questioned was if the increases were meant for more just than the Medicare increases, and the answer was yes. Mr. Prestersik said it was. So it's meant to, as the next line.
So how would you change your,
What I questioned, if the increase would cover just the Medicare increases or also salary increases. And then the next line, Mr. Prestersik answered that the increase will keep up the additional fees, whether used for supplies or EMT training or salaries.
okay, so how would you change that line? How would you amend the question if the increase would cover?
Recover not just
Expensive.
Medicare increases, but also was it meant for salary increases as well? And then Paul's answer was right below that.
Anything else? No?
I stopped reviewing them at that point.
Oh, did you want to not continue?
Well,
Okay, we'll have
obviously,
these.
this doesn't concern anybody else on
Yeah.
the board, so I'm going to stop reading through them. But I think that they didn't make for a very good record of what we spoke about, and I'm concerned about it.
All right.
And I expressed the concern before, Marie. We've got to have the minutes reflect what we talk about, and they can't be wrong votes
Mm-hmm.
and other things. And I understand we get to review them, but we ought to review them.
All right, so I'm going to ask for the, to be tabled, okay?
So moved.
And if this one could be passed on. All right, moving on from the minutes. The first item on the agenda is the open meeting law violation report. Back in August, Select Board member Mr. Santinello filed an open meeting law complaint against the Long Meadow Board of Selectmen. and that was filed in regards to an event that occurred on August 7th, 2013. Our attorney reviewed it. We were interviewed by the Attorney General's office, and we did receive a letter back from the Attorney General's office stating there was, they did not find a violation, an intentional violation of the open meeting law or a violation of the open meeting law. And the only thing that was requested, that what was discussed in the parking lot after the meeting, that it be put in the minutes in some way. So it's my recommendation that the response from the Attorney General's office be included as part of the minutes in order for what was discussed in the parking lot to be included in the minutes. Is there anything else that people would like to add to that?
I'd like to, read it says, accordingly, in the interest of transparency, we strongly encourage the board to disclose the specific details of the August 5th, 2013 post-meeting discussion during a properly posted open meeting. It does not say to put them in the minutes. And that was the gist of the complaint, because when I asked to discuss what was being discussed at that point, because there were 3 members present, I was told by you that nothing happened and that and it was reported to our attorney, who I filed the complaint with, because it went to the board and to Attorney Martell, that it was covered in subsequent meetings. And as the Attorney General's letter said, that they could find no mention of that discussion in any of the subsequent meetings based on their review of minutes. So accordingly, and this is their words, in the interest of transparency, we strongly encourage the board to disclose the specific details of that meeting. And I would ask that that not be put into minutes, that it would be a discussion item on an agenda per this letter.
Okay, if you want what actually happened in regards to what occurred within that meeting, is it was discussed in previous later meetings. What was said by the Attorney General's office is that we specifically did not read into the minutes on what occurred there. We can find that in the complaint as well as our response letter that went to the Attorney General's office. The complaint that was filed saying that there was an intentional violation of the open meeting law, which says that an intentional means that we had stood outside and we intentionally had a meeting in order to keep this from other members of the board as well as the residents. There was finding of no intentional violation as well as no unintentional violation. Immediately post this meeting, we did have our attorney came in on this right after the 7th and talked about what it meant to have a violation of open meeting law. And that this complaint was not filed till weeks later. I believe that if we put in this response from the Attorney General's office, and in addition, I'll be glad to put the written response that we sent in to the Attorney General's office, which was discussed at a follow-up meeting. That will include everything that occurred that evening. Does anyone else feel they want to add something else to what was discussed the evening of August 7th?
Maria, I'm going to say it one more time. The reason why a complaint was filed, and I approached you on a couple of occasions prior to filing that complaint, to have it on the agenda to talk about what was discussed, you said there was no violation. There were 3 members present. What the letter said from the Attorney General's office was, while there was a quorum of the board, you said you didn't say a word about what was going on during the discussion. In fact, you were trying to diffuse the discussion, according to the letter. And they believed you, and that's fine. So even though there was 3 members present, they said it was not an intentional violation of open meeting law. What it also says is that they reviewed the subsequent minutes of those meetings in which you said that was discussed and found no evidence of that discussion. And in the very last...
No, that's absolutely not what they're saying. They're saying they specifically have not said what was said in the parking lot, and it was not read into the minutes. What was discussed in the parking lot was exactly talked about on the subsequent meeting. In fact, it was expanded on, and it was even discussed in the August 7th meeting. And I specifically told you that there was nothing said that was different that has not been said in the minutes. What the Attorney General's office is for us to ask specifically state what was said during that meeting, not that there was any information that was not put in, but they wanted it placed on the August 7th meeting. This will fulfill the requirements of the Attorney General's office. The amount of time that has been put on by the Select Board members, by our attorney, is really inappropriate for regards to this. There's absolutely no information that has been kept from you or from the residents in regards to what was discussed out there. And
Could
this
you-
will
since-
all be in
since
the
you-
complaint.
Since you read a nice letter from Ms. Townsend, I'm going to read what the Attorney General said, since you've opened this stuff up. In the response to this complaint, Ms. Angelides contends that the board disclosed the detail of this August 5, 2013 discussion during a subsequent open meeting. However, none of the board members interviewed could identify which meeting that was, and our review of the minutes from several subsequent meetings did not identify any such disclosure. That's from the Attorney General's office, not from me.
And as I repeat, and I'm going to repeat myself, and again, this is taking valuable time, what they're asking is for us to say exactly what was said that evening, not the essence of what it was. We discussed that evening as we were leaving on how we were working together as a group. And that is still been discussed. The specific issue on casino mitigation and how we approached that was discussed in multiple meetings after that. And if you feel that this is still ineffective for us to put in the report from the Attorney General's office, as well as our letter to there, including your letter of complaint that is also part of our, all of our minutes in regards to other meetings, then you can file another letter. But right now, this is specifically what they asked for us to do, and we are doing it. And the reason it's on the agenda is order to respond to what the request of the Attorney General's office is, which is to put in actual minutes what occurred that evening. And these three
It doesn't
reports
say
will be
minutes.
complete.
It doesn't say minutes. It says,
Right.
the board to discuss the specific details.
After the alleged violation, Attorney Martell advised that the board craft and adopt a response to the complaint, which included a description of what happened. And I don't recall the meeting date either, but I do recall we were shorthanded that night. I think there were 2 board members absent. And
No.
Marie,
Yeah.
I thought that was the case because no one made a motion to say that this is our response. Or maybe it was voted down, but
No, it
a
was,
response was written.
right.
It was entered in the record, and it was not approved per the guidance of town council. So I don't know if the minutes didn't reflect that process, but that I do recall that happening, and I think that was what we were supposed to do to fulfill the requirement.
Yes, so if we put this in and we put the other, it's my recommendation that will fulfill the requirement. Does anyone have any other discussion on what they would like added to the minutes? Okay. So I will be giving you a copy of this, Jackie, as well as I'll make sure you have the other, though it was already placed in the minutes. We'll put it all together in one spot so everyone can see it together.
I have one
Yeah.
question. I was reading here, too. I guess I missed something in there. Because Mr. Santinello is the one that filed the complaint. Is there anything that you feel is lacking, Paul?
I don't know, were you informed of something that happened in that August 5th meetings and subsequent meetings
No, I've read here. This is the only explanation I've ever received.
I just read the top paragraph on page 3, Rich. That's what, I think by saying there was minutes that were never approved, there was a report that was never voted on by this board, a response that was never voted on by the board.
Right.
And all of that data went to the Attorney General, according to Dave Martell. I would imagine that's what
And
he...
actually, everyone else on this board also received that letter that went in, including yourself, Paul. You were there at that meeting. It was part of the open record and of that meeting, which it all had to be in within 30 days of the complaint. Your complaint was filed, I believe, 3 weeks after the event and after we had already sat down with our attorney and who had given us a description of various issues in regards to open meeting law. So you did receive that initial letter. I'll be glad to put it again in these minutes, but I think we really need to move on because right now we have a lot of work for the town in regards to the budget and the warrant we need to get to this evening. Is there anyone else who wanted to add something else to what occurred that evening?
No, I wasn't in the fray.
Mhm.
But are you saying that we received this letter, this open meeting law complaint thing from Dave Martell?
Yes, the letter that went, you received it back in September. I had it on the agenda for the select board to vote, and
Okay.
I stated we were sending this in. Did anyone want to make any changes?
I just don't recall
Actually,
it.
Richard, I think you were not at that meeting.
I was
when-
going to say, because
when-
I've never seen this letter.
Yes,
Oh, this is likely, if it was September, I was in
Yeah.
Switzerland.
but you will receive another copy because it's going to go into the minutes for
Good.
tonight. Okay, thanks. All right, now another discussion that we had, and I had talked to our attorney about being here tonight, and I guess I forgot to call him again today to remind him, but the Charter Commission versus committee. This is something that's been discussed numerous times in this board, and actually for several years. We've talked about putting together a charter review committee. There's discussions about charter commission. Richard pointed out numerous times we voted to go forward on that, but we really haven't completed that in getting a committee together. At the MMA, Richard and I spoke to several other towns who have been doing the charter review, which is really suggested every 6 years, and they said they usually start with a charter committee, and if there are any recommended changes that go beyond, that actually involve the composition of the select board or the town manager, then they actually put that in front of the town for a vote. So they start with the committee, and they really never start with the commission. According to the review by Dave Martell that we sent to everyone, if the town is looking to change the composition of the board or the length of term of the select board members, or moving away from a town manager form of government, then we would have to have a charter commission. So I put this on so we could make a decision if we're moving ahead with a commission or a committee, and so we could at least start getting the charter review begun, which I think is an important part, that this board seems to think is important because they've voted on it several times to move forward.
So what can a committee can't really do anything, then, can they?
A committee can do everything but change the number of select board members, the terms of their office, in other words, instead of going from 3 years to go to 2 years,
Right.
or to change the idea of just having a professional town manager.
Change the concept of government.
Yes. But other than that, everything else required in whether we're talking about composition or what committees are supposed to be doing, what rules and responsibilities, all those can be changed within a charter committee. If there's anything larger, what I understand is that we either put a commission together, which is a very long process, or we can bring that up in front of a town vote.
Yeah. Because I've heard some of the commissions don't even probably take a year. I know they can take 2 years. I think they have a 2-year reporting period, is it, or 18 months or something? It's a long period of time.
Yeah.
Well, and Murray, just to clarify for people at home, the committee wouldn't actually change the charter. The committee would just be able to propose changes that would be voted on at town meeting.
Recommendations, yes. So if they decided that they wanted to change the composition of committees or anything like that, that would go in front of
Right.
bylaw changes in front of the town. So
Right.
these are recommendations that probably would go in front of the select board, and then the select board would also talk about what should go forward.
But according to Mr. Martell's letter, the select board can do that without a committee.
Yes. But it's
Same-
also
the same thing.
recommended, my understanding is that you get a committee together to do a really thorough charter review. We've had a charter in place now for 8 years without really reviewing the functionings and what maybe tweaking here and there needs to be changed. So whether we can do it ourselves, but it's usually recommended that you get a group together that interviews. In fact, I think that was even discussed by the select board several years ago, that would interview the various people that are working under the charter to see where they recommend changes. Now, is there a feeling among the board to go ahead with a charter committee for a charter review, for us to have a subcommittee trying to do it and work with other members of the government, or actually look forward towards a charter commission, a formal?
I can give my 2 cents on it. We had a recent correspondence from a citizen-type committee that cast some shadows on our activities. So I think my personal feelings would be that we've passed the point of a charter committee. I think we'd be into a charter commission. I think we need to look at the whole thing in depth, because there's an indication that maybe we weren't managing properly, and if we're not managing properly, then possibly we don't have the right form of government then. It was indicated by some of our leading members of the public out there. And I think to have just a committee that can only change participation of this, that, and the other doesn't meet that holistic goal of reviewing everything. all of those people, I don't think any of those people have actually served under this charter. They were members of the board before the charter was put in. So, and the charter has never been reviewed since that point. So I'm certainly not opposed to either one, but I'd be more in favor of a charter commission that is fully empowered to look at it and see how the inner workings are working and being able to cross over that bridge of just committee assignments, because we can do all the other stuff, Marie. I mean, we can do everything the committee can do, so if we opt that way, then we no sense in even having a committee. I mean, each of us can have feelings about the charter as it is right now. So if we were going to do that, we can move forward as a board to do that.
Mark?
I actually disagree, Richard. I think we ought to start with a committee. I think at least one of the goals I saw of this is to clean up things that were intended through the charter that in practice aren't working the way that they may have been envisioned. It's more of a cleanup than a wholesale change. I think that, the fact that, as this letter says, the only things that a committee can't recommend about is the makeup is relating to the composition, mode of election, or appointment, or terms of office of the Board of Selectmen or the town manager. And, and I think that there's a lot of things that we probably would want to do or might consider doing that could make the way we govern and the way the town is governed more efficient, even without addressing those items. I think the issue with a commission requires that people run for the commission, they go through an election process, and it's a long way off. The other thing is, once you do it, it can make some significant changes, I guess, but even that then has to go before the annual town meeting. I'd rather give a chance to do something in the interim.
Well, I agree with you, Mark, but you can't do anything with that commission or the committee that we can't do as a board right now in the interim.
And I agree with that, and that's why I mentioned that. If we, and since we're the ones dealing with it, if we see some issues, the difference, I think, Richard, is political cover. I mean, what's more likely to get through an annual town meeting is that the select board proposes these changes to the charter, or that a committee has reviewed all this stuff, and based on the committee's recommendations, these changes to the charter are being recommended. And I think that if you get a committee to do it, you've got to, if you will, at least some third parties looking at it as well, and you don't just have the select board's trying to go for some kind of a move on the charter. I think I agree with you, we could do it. And clearly, there are a few glaring things that we probably ought to do. But the truth is, according to this, any one of us can do it as well. Any one of us can propose a change at town meeting, according to this. So.
Of the basic requirements, some of the very, very basic
anything
stuff.
except the terms and elections and composition of the office of the town manager and the select board. Yeah. So.
Alex?
We talked about this before, and to me, this feels like a solution in search for a problem. In my time on the select board, I know it's less than a year, I've yet to come to a point where I feel like it's the charter's getting in the way, or our basic form of government has stopped us from doing something. And prior to that, I've been writing a column, watching the select board for 7 years. I've never seen an instance where the charter seems to be the issue. I don't know, and I've yet to hear even now what problem are we seeking to solve. The letter that Mr. Foster referred to, again, it kind of feels like a tempest in a teacup. There was this allegation that somehow the board wasn't complying with the law, and yet I've never heard anybody say how the select board has ever violated the law or ever done anything inconsistent with the charter. If you can't come up with a single instance of a problem, it kind of makes me wonder whether the problem exists. So I think there's so many substantive things that we need to do, that focusing on our form of government is not very high priority unless we can really identify what the problem is that we're trying to solve.
Paul?
About 4 years ago, there were two members of the Charter Commission that ended up doing an exit interview, so to speak, of the charter. The charter itself is vague in many places. It was intentionally left like that by the people who constructed it, because they didn't want to make actually the decisions that needed to be made under the charter. For example, the consolidation of the finance department. And now, Alex, there's one problem I'm going to identify for you right there, the consolidation of the finance department. Not only did not all of the people come over from the schools to be consolidated under one finance department, they actually kept an employee there and now have reconstituted their own finance department. In fact, the business manager is no longer the business manager, he's an assistant superintendent of finance. So there's an issue of the charter that can't be corrected by a committee, number one. It was an issue intentionally vague by the people who founded the charter or constructed the charter, in their words, for people to work it out. And all of a sudden what happens is politics gets involved, whether it's school versus town, whatever your philosophies are and so forth. So there's one example of how it doesn't work, is that it didn't say this is what will happen. There was a lot of things that were left to be assumed under the charter. And Mark, I disagree with you in the sense that, a committee is the right way to look at it, because if you're going to go through it, have people run for the position, go through it. What was supposed to take 2 years, within 6 months, they identified the charter that we would have in Long Meadow. We basically took a boilerplate from a couple other communities and created Long Meadow's charter. And that really, that was never really what the intent of the voters were. It was supposed to take 2 years of study to come back with the recommendation. In less than 6 months, we had it nailed. And regardless of what the letter said, it didn't have anything to do with what we're talking about this evening. The review of the charter was supposed to have happened 4 or 5 years ago, because we're into our 10th year of the charter, not our 8th. We're 10 years now. And in the first year, it was walking on eggshells and not following the rules and negotiating what was written on paper. So a new constitution in Long Meadow was created, and it was negotiated out of it by parties involved. And I think that just leads to a lot of different issues. So under our charter, you're supposed to have a consolidation of the finance department. And if you are, that's great. If you're not, that's great. That's fine. But it doesn't work. So a review of the charter is the only way that you do that. And I think a charter commission that is separately elected, that doesn't have the influence of the board voting for our board voting for particular members to be placed on a committee, and we'll spend 10 minutes interviewing them and less time debating who the applicants are. Let the public vet them, let them come back in and do a review. The charter was expedited for the sake of getting it done. And regardless of what anybody will tell you, I just gave you one example of that didn't work. And there were other things that were in there. Because under the charter, for example, under the strong town manager form of government, there's not supposed to be a capital planning committee, but we kept it. And we kept certain things so people wouldn't get mad. We kept the park commission so people wouldn't get upset, because they were elected at one point prior to the charter. So those are the things that were kind of soft pedaled out there. And it didn't just, the charter didn't, it didn't come in and say, here's the line, this is what it's going to be from day one. They left it vague so that people could work it out. And unfortunately, when you have committees and so forth trying to work it out, my suggestion is that if you're going to go down this road, have a commission formed, let them get elected, and let them review it. The option that comes back is independent of this board, the recommendation that will come back to the town.
Let's talk about the commission. Now, the timeline of that, Mark, isn't it, if they have to be elected, that means they have to be elected in June, which means they have to get on the ballot, which means it can't happen this year.
Well, that's assuming we have elections coming up in the fall. I don't know if they can be put on the municipal elections, or the governor's election, for example. I don't know if they can or can't.
I don't believe they can.
We've put other things on ballots that were statewide.
I think that if we go with the commission, we've got a year delay. If we start with the committee can then move the topic down the road. Because even when you talked about the finance committee and those issues, that has nothing to do with the select board, has nothing to do with the town manager. That can be addressed and recommendations can come out of a committee to that. If we start with the committee now, with them looking towards doing the timeline, getting it forward on a commission, I think we will at least start the project going. So I'm not closing the door to a commission, I just don't think we can do it in the
And I
next 6 months.
think we do, see, and I think if it's really worth us if it's really worth us doing it, if it cannot be put on the November ballot during the statewide offices, and I don't know why it wouldn't be, and Mr. Pasterzak might have more insight into that, or Catherine would, because I think we have put things on the statewide ballot before. But if it can't be done in November, I don't see why we wouldn't even call for a special election to have it done if it really makes that much difference. I think a committee separately elected that has no influence from this board in terms of appointments has a better response to the board or to the town people than an appointed committee will. And if you're going to do a committee, you're waiting another year anyway, so it doesn't really
Oh,
matter.
no, we could get a committee started.
In the sense of if they make recommendations and they're going to make recommendations, you're going to have to form a committee anyway for those things that cannot be handled at town meeting, a commission. So I'm willing, if it's something if it's important to do, enough to do, I would even be willing to have a special election for a commission.
Oh.
Because I think it's that important. I think a committee is us appointing someone to look at the things that may or may not make a difference. And if they come back and say, we do think the finance department should be consolidated.
Alex?
I was gonna say, I mean, okay, so I've heard one thing, the finance, and I've heard this before, about this finance committee,
It's
being
not a
consolidated.
finance department. Big
Finance
difference.
department, sorry. Why don't we just do it? I mean, why don't we, if this has been a festering wound for years, right? I mean,
think it's-
we can
I-
propose a bylaw, and let's debate it and decide that. I mean, to me, to sort of throw open the whole question of what our form of government is,
But
to
you don't
address that
accept that there
specific-
has to be charter reviews on a charter? I mean, it's recommended that all towns review charters every 6 years. We're going out 8, 10 years, and we're not doing it. So you're saying unless we specifically say what we need to review, we shouldn't review
I mean,
it?
I think we should have a sense that something's broken,
Okay, so is
and-
there no consensus on the board to even get a committee together?
I don't know, you haven't taken a vote on it.
Well, there's no motion. Is there a motion to do a committee?
No, see, I would make a motion to form a charter commission for review of the charter.
And charter commission can't occur for another year, unless we're willing to spend the money of $10,000 on a special.
I just made a motion.
Okay, we'll second it, and we'll go
There you
for a vote on it, see what
Okay.
we do on the charter commission.
So Paul, you moved,
go. To create a charter commission for
and
review of the charter.
Richard second.
Yep.
And so to look into the cost, because,
No, to create a charter review commission, or charter commission.
is there any further discussion on it?
It's only, my only point is this is the third year I've made that motion in a row, because we should be reviewing our charter. And Alex, it was
Well-
meant to be reviewed. I mean, so.
Well,
it's-
last year, you didn't do anything with it if it was the
It was
third year.
voted down. It was voted down 4-1. That was the lone vote that supported it last year.
But there was a committee, and there was nothing ever followed.
No,
No
the
one
committee was
submitted
never formed.
applications. No one submitted, there was one application submitted. That was 3 years ago.
So any discussion on forming the charter commission?
I already noted that I thought a committee was all we needed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in favor of a charter commission.
And I've already expressed my feelings that I feel if you're gonna go for it, you just might as well set up.
Okay, all
set up
those
the
in
thing
favor
and
of a
be done.
charter
I
commission?
guess I couldn't continue talking.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I thought you said I already said it.
No,
Oh, you
right.
said I already said it.
ready to
so-
vote.
Okay. All right, all those in favor of a charter commission? All those opposed? All right, let's move on then. Town manager budget presentation.
Town warrant.
Oh, the town warrant, that's right. All right, let's go to the town
Yeah,
warrant.
fine. Marie, can
Yeah.
I make a motion for a charter committee?
Yes.
I'll move that we form a charter committee.
Is there a second? Well, I will second it.
I hope so. I hope one of you guys will say it.
Okay. I believe that there is a lot in discussion. There's a lot that still needs to be done in regards to it. We held on to some old things. We put in some new. How the capital planning's working really could be ironed out issues. We find we have some committees that have no terms at all, others that have terms. I think there's a lot that could be worked on by committee. Now, fine, this board could do it, but I don't think we have the time to sit and really go through it line by line and see what needs to be corrected. We have the consolidation of many departments between the schools and the town, but how that's going to work out, we've been struggling in subcommittees, and I think a charter committee would be very valuable this time, and also I think it's the responsible thing to do. We should review our charter every 6 years, and we're out 8 to 10. Anything you want to say in favor of it, Mark?
I think I've spoken already, that's fine.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay. We tried again, third year in a row. Now,
So we didn't get a committee
or commission.
Or commission.
Nope.
And
So
yet-
there's
and
another
yet-
vote.
And yet it clearly states that we should review our charter.
Yep.
I'm amazed.
So let's go on to the warrant. Now, do we want to go through each warrant and how do you,
just need to.
this is the way we've done it in the past? We've gone warrant,
Article by article.
article by article?
Well, Marie? Do we need to close, I mean, what's the impetus for closing the warrant at this point? My recollection from this fall was that doesn't preclude us from putting warrant articles on.
Right.
But it closes to citizen petitions or other things.
Yes.
Haven't we already done that? I thought we've already closed the warrant. In order for us to put something on it, we'd have to open the warrant.
Yes.
No, we haven't voted to close it.
voted to close it?
Well, today we're supposed to close the
We
warrant,
got it a month ago.
Let's close it.
but the citizens petition date has passed.
Okay. But
So today, we close the warrant, and then I understood there's a set schedule, and we're setting the warrant on the 17th. Everything has to start getting to print.
is it that, I mean, that's like 2 months in advance. I mean, are we really?
It has to get to the printer for early April in order that, because the annual town meeting material has to be delivered to every household. So we need time to print, and it has to be delivered 2 weeks before the annual town meeting. So working backwards, it's even at the 17th, but some part of it is mid to latter part of March at the latest.
So, part of the reason I'm bringing this up is my understanding is the planning board is going to be proposing a bylaw. Are you aware?
We have a placeholder, so there are some things that there'll be placeholders in here.
Okay.
Yeah, and as you recall from the fall, there were a few kind of administrative level recommended articles that did appear that ended up on the warrant after we closed it. I think this is closing it to citizen petitions. I guess you need an official act to do that. And then you set the warrant later on, and then that's when it's
Right.
off to the presses.
And so today, when we go through article by article, we approve the articles to go on the warrant.
Is that what we're doing? Because I thought we were just closing.
No, that's
This
when
is
you
just
set
a-
it. This is just,
That's just setting it?
yeah, I think you just close it. You have to go
I
through.
think you can close it if you want to do a review, to start talking about a few of them, and we have to do.
Okay.
But I mean, I don't think that's complete.
Well, let's go through and see if there are any questions or problems with any of the articles.
I mean, do we need, I mean, we still have to do the budget. I mean,
Yep. Article 1 on the William Goldwath bequest. Is there any questions or problems with Article 1?
No.
How about Article 2, the transfer of funds to pay bills for the prior year? Any questions or problems with Article 2? Article 3, the transfer of $225,000 for funding of the snow and ice removal deficit.
What's
And-
it? It's likely to change, or it might change.
Well, I think the deficit is closer to 200,000 at this point, so as much as this can be a million on the floor, I just figure we'd have some other need before the winter's out.
Okay, Article 4, to see if the town will vote to accept the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 8G, authorizing to the town to enter into agreements with other cities or towns for mutual aid. Any questions or problems with Article 4? Mark?
Is that a new provision? Because I don't recall us ever having done that before.
I haven't either.
And we've always done mutual aid with surrounding,
This is specific to police, isn't it?
In towns in Connecticut, maybe, has it always just been informal and we're looking to do written agreements?
I don't know that you have language on it. I think this is a placeholder. I think Attorney Martell is working on language on this one.
But is this new?
Yes.
I was at a chiefs of police meeting where this was being discussed. I think this is because they can't go into surrounding communities and, what do you call it, with arrest and authority and so forth. So if there's someone speeding, they can pursue them, but if there's another crime, for example, running the red light or something, they can't pursue them. And I think this allows them to do that and work with the other community as opposed to something that's out there, they can't cross the town line or something like that.
And this is specific to Connecticut?
No,
I honestly, I don't know that much about it. I just saw.
another city or town in the Commonwealth, as well as contiguous cities and towns in Connecticut.
In Connecticut.
I think there's a state legislative, or excuse me, a state statutory element to this that like I said, I have not seen the language from Dave Martell, so I'll know a lot more about it once I do.
So this is a placeholder?
Correct.
Okay.
I guess it would have, I assume there's going to be an explanation below, because there was no explanation there.
It's just a placeholder.
Okay, Article 5 will transfer $400,000, greater or lesser sum from the Operation Stabilization Fund to cover the high school project. Any questions
Yeah.
or problems with that?
I have a few questions about.
First of all, I have a bunch of questions. The most is, why are we going to transfer funds from Operation Stabilization Fund instead of going out with a ban or a bond or something else?
Oh.
Because this is a high school project,
We could very easy, Mark, I kind of threw this out to create discussion.
Okay.
To find out what the sense of the board was. I
All right.
mean, nothing even has to be done at this point in time.
Well, somehow we're going to have to pay the $400,000.
Well, I will say, we did discuss this further with the school building committee co-chairs, as well as the owner's project manager, and I would recommend that the final town meeting warrant probably won't have this on there, because the final number won't be known till project closeout, which could be a few months from now. And so I think this is probably an item more for the special town meeting, just because of the timing of when we're going to know the actual amount
Special town meeting
November.
in the fall.
in the fall town meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
So I would say this one will probably be removed from the warrant.
Can I just have one question, maybe a comment. I thought the last time we talked about this, maybe 2 months ago, that net, it was a break even, because there were some energy credits that were going to come back to the town in the sense of going into the general fund, but those are after because it has to go through that series of approvals once the project's technically completed, which might not happen for another year. Is that still kind of the case of what you're looking at?
No, I think it might have been back in the fall. I'm not quite sure when it was. We may have mentioned a figure of $250,000. And there are some energy credits that did come in. The MSBA is going to want their money. This does not take into consideration those amounts of money. This is a number by the OPM that's fluttering around 400,000. He's fighting with the general contractor over certain areas, and he's fighting certain areas with the MSBA for reimbursement for us. So there's a lot of moving parts that are going on, but this is his worst-case scenario at this point.
So those energy credits that have come in, are we just repurposing those in the general fund as part of free cash?
Right now, they are going into the general fund. They would have to be voted out if they were to be used again.
There's also, I believe, some equipment rebates that come back to the town.
There may be more in the form of
Is it
rebates.
in
We've
addition to
received
energy
about
rebates?
$130,000 from, for natural gas and WIMCO kind of incentives.
Yeah, when we first put this on here, I think that the intent was, we know this is coming. We thought, quite frankly, that we would know a lot more specifically where the number was. But in the most recent discussion we had, largely because of paperwork delays between the owner's project manager and the general contractor, we still don't know what the number's going to be. So after that discussion, we agreed that it probably should be put off until the fall town meeting because we just don't know what the number is. And we won't.
Richard, I mean,
Just two
Hey.
quick comments. One is that the reason for my comment, Paul, was that the town voters already authorized us to bond the entire amount. So we wouldn't have to go out for additional authorization from town voters.
Correct.
We can borrow up to $77 million or some number.
Correct.
So if we choose to bond it at some point, we can do that under the authority we already have. All we got to do is figure out how to do it so that.
The
it's-
amount and.
we don't pay more for the bonding costs than for the bonds themselves,
Right.
Yeah.
from the bonds themselves. The other thing is, since we're having this discussion, I think it's important, I think people at home are sitting there saying, how did this happen? Just to reiterate to folks at home that the cost of building the high school is coming in about $1 million, I
I think it was
believe.
almost 2 million.
Almost $2 million below the total project cost, but the town share is estimated to be something, up to $400,000 above the original town share cost. And I had put this in, but not that if we're not going to have it, but I thought the explanation needs to include that part of the town share cost overruns were associated with repairs to the pool, which were non-reimbursable, as well as change orders that were non-reimbursable, and the site preparation costs, which was an asbestos discovery when we first dug for this part, the foundation of, I guess, it was a C section, building C of the building. And I think it's important for people to understand that was the reason that the town shares went up.
Yeah, I agree, Mark. The project, I think, was overall well-managed. There are just certain things the state doesn't reimburse. The state that, when they pay for about half the school, there are certain things they won't reimburse half of. And a lot of the things you just described fall into that category. So I think you're right to not convey the impression that, we gilded faucets or something like that. It was all things that come up during the course of a large-scale project.
so as we get closer to the warrant,
Probably fall
Wow.
town meeting will know.
we'll know. Okay.
So are we likely then to not have this on?
I don't think
Take it
it'll be,
off.
I would recommend not be on the warrant.
Okay. All right, Article 6, the town will transfer $150,000 greater or lesser from the water retained earning funds to cover higher than originally budgeted for charges on our water supply purchased from the city of Springfield. So our rates went up and we
I
have
have a question.
deficit.
Did the rates go up, or did usage go up, or what's this all
I thought
about?
the rates went up and it's both. The consumption is down. We're sending out bills this week, so we'll have a better idea of where we're estimated to stand. But I just wanted to also get this one in as a placeholder, because right now, we are paying higher amounts to the city, and I don't think our consumption is up I don't think our consumption is up, so I think
Well,
it's
that's
the
what
rate.
surprised me, because consumption should have been down.
Right, so then it would be the rate then, I
Yeah.
don't know the exact rate of what we're paying Springfield, but our budget right now is very much short when I project it out for June 30th.
Does anybody know what the rate, how much it increased?
We
I'd
did,
have to get it from Mike.
yeah.
Yeah, we were given that
We were.
recently.
Mm.
I can go back and look if you don't know.
We were?
The other thing, though, Paul, there's some degree to this that's because of the way we went to uniform billing as well, and the first bill for 2014
Did not
is
re-
just going out.
The first is, right, I guess you can put it that way.
The first bill with the 2014 rates
Yes.
is just going
It's
out.
just going out.
With the
one-
fiscal
bill-
year
The bill that was sent
2014
out in
rates.
September reflected the previous rate.
Right, so
It's a pretty
this one
si-
year, we've got a lag in implementing rates, and so.
It's a pretty sizable amount of money. That's the reason I was wondering.
Oh, yeah.
We were projecting, when we set the rates last summer, it was August, we were doing projected increases based on history and trends. And then, but we didn't get the actual bill from the commission till after the rates were set, and it was significantly more. So you're right. We certainly will have that information as part of the full, and I guess wasn't expecting to go through this in this level of detail. I thought we were just gonna kind of close the warrant, and go through these at a separate meeting with more detail.
Okay, Article 7, the town will transfer available funds $35,000 to supplement the unemployment budget or take any action thereof. Any questions?
Marie? Given what the town manager was saying, that he wasn't, he was expecting it was gonna be closing, this doesn't feel like a very good use of our time for us to be sort of wrestling with this
Actually,
document
I think-
based, can I finish?
Yeah.
Wrestling with this document without all of the information. I mean, it seems like this would be good, something that would be good to do once, rather than more than once.
The reason I'm doing it, and we can do it quickly, is that often there are questions in regards to closing the warrant, and we've had trouble in the past. I just wanted to go through it to make sure where people's questions were, so the answer could get them, and we could get it actually set when the time comes on the next time we're together. Any questions or problems on the unemployment budget?
I do. This was, I think we had discussed this at the meeting in the firehouse about unemployment, and there were questions about our practices and, hiring and rehiring people, and whether that was leading to more unemployment claims. And then my recollection from that meeting was that nothing was too untoward. But then I looked at this article, and it looks to me that we're having $100,000 budgeted, and then we have to have $35,000 more. I mean, that's like obviously it's a 1/3 increase, which really tells me that there is a substantial uptick in these unemployment claims, and it bears looking at. I don't know, does anybody have any information about why it's substantially more?
And the only thing I can ask the school to get information on their layoffs that they had. I think, I also mentioned previously there was a lot of retroactive amounts that came through because of the federal government actions. I think Mr. Layassi had explained some of that. There are a handful of unemployment costs on the town side that we can certainly give you the detailed information as to why the layoffs or why the separations, which the school department were ones that I do not have the specifics on.
Yeah, because one of the questions that at least I had was, I saw these, like middle of last year, this huge number of coaches being postings, which made me think everybody had been fired, which seemed kind of unlikely. And it raised the question for me, were they being laid off with the contemplation that they would be rehired? And if that's going on, I could see how that could increase our unemployment.
I believe coaches are stipended, not salaried. There's a difference. They receive one check at the end of the year. They do not receive a salary.
Which means,
They're stipended. It's not a
so in other words,
benefited
they could
position.
not make an unemployment claim?
They do not qualify for unemployment. They're a seasonal coach.
Okay.
But there have been changes this year in regards to seasonal hirees that were not in favor of the town.
Annually, we apply for what's known as a seasonal employment exemption. So there are certain types of positions that, regardless if we lay off, the laid off individual has no right to unemployment. Those types of positions are usually unique positions that are less than 12 weeks, 12 or 16 weeks. Prime example being a pool guard, lifeguard. They're hired for a specific short-term period, and because of our seasonal designation, they are given upfront information that this position has qualified for the exemption, and at the end of the year, if they want to apply for unemployment, they can, but they are not allowed to collect anything. So there are a certain number of positions that we go through annually, we have to apply for those types of exemption criteria.
Any other questions for Article 7? Article 8, in regards to salary and compensation of the moderator and select persons.
Article 8 will actually be the budget article.
and the general budget article, okay. And
I think we need to take select board salary up to about $100,000.
Sarcasm doesn't work. You know, that.
so the Article 11 is just 8 is,
It's kind of a
these are the-
placeholder for.
all
the
these are
budget.
placeholders, okay. Article 9 is the revolving fund for the school department.
I think there's one before that I'd like to,
There's a
it's
couple
not
before
numbered.
that.
Well, they're not numbered, that's why I thought they were just
Right after
budget.
Article 8, there says article, and there's no number,
There-
or the
there-
very
yeah,
next
there's no-
one.
It's the one for $45,000 for salary settlement.
Okay,
You know, in particular, that is if we don't have a settlement by the time we get to the annual town meeting to adjust basically for the police superior officers, this will have set aside money, enough money, hopefully, that if they settle in FY '15, we wouldn't have to go to town meeting in order to have the appropriation made.
So this is for that unit, it's not for any of the other units then?
The other units are
We already
signed.
have, but several of the, I believe they were signed after the start of this fiscal year.
They were signed, and we did the same type of article the last 2 fiscal years, so we had money within those articles to satisfy those other collective bargaining units.
Okay.
We still have some money available that was set aside for the superior officers, and within FY '14, when those units were granted their increases, we also did some internal funding from attrition savings that we had to make things meet also.
So there's additional dollars besides this $45,000 for this particular bargaining unit set aside.
That is correct, but you have to remember, we were going back to FY '13, '14, '15, so we have, yes.
A lot
Answer your
of
question,
retro payments to be made.
yes. Right.
Al?
The, I mean, since, it sounds like this has been a practice, but aren't we tipping our hand a little bit by setting aside money for a settlement that we haven't entered into?
I mean, we've been negotiating with this particular unit for a while and exchanged proposals, and, I mean, I think we also know what the directive of the select board was and what the value of that directive is, so this is, I think, well within range of that, so I don't necessarily, I can see how intuitively it would seem like you are tipping your hand, but in the practice of this specific unit, I would say that that's probably not the case. They're probably aware of where the status of negotiations are and what things would be worth.
And the issue is not the dollars, it's the salary settlement line item, which allows the finance director to release the funds, as opposed to having this in free cash and having to have a vote for an appropriation at town meeting. That's what this does. It gives the financial chief, CFO, in that particular line item. To your point, yeah, whenever we've done this, you are kind of saying, here's the pool of money. But it's also served us well in the sense that we haven't had to have a special town meeting to fund salaries.
Now, the next 3 have no numbers.
They were just set aside, that's where normally we place capital items.
Okay. And then Article 9 is regarding establishing the revolving fund for the schools.
This is an annual requirement to have that revolving fund.
Any questions on?
Yeah, at some point in time, doesn't it just make sense that that money goes into the general fund and it's adjusted in the next, I mean, we're not talking tens of thousands of dollars anymore, are we?
No, we're expecting $5,000.
Yeah, I mean, but anyway, I think at some point, we need to have a discussion with the school committee about this takes up more time at the town. Because then everybody gets up and says, are you selling soft drinks at the high school? And we're not, and.
Comment from Mr. Mazza today is this is probably going to go away because the revenue is going to disappear very shortly. I think they have to go out to bid within a very short period of time anyway.
Okay.
Okay, Article 10, to vote, appropriate the sum of $8,000 for the community preservation, local surcharge, and trust fund for administrative costs. This is on every year.
That's an annual thing. It covers the Community Preservation Act's administrative expenses, should they have an individual they hire or do special consultation, things of that nature, but they do have a small amount annually that they put aside for those administrative costs.
Any questions or problems with Article 10? Okay, Article 11, to see if the town will vote to fund the community preservation project to renovate the Blinn tennis courts and lighting, the amount of $375,000 to be funded by $50,000 from the Open Space Fund, $325,000 from undesignated fund balance, or take any other action. And this appropriation that the energy-efficient lighting be installed. This is a CPA project. Any questions, Mark?
I don't, but I think that we ought to just look at all the CPA, since we just had a review at our last meeting by the CPA, just take all those warrant articles as a group here, just to see, I mean, they're all,
Okay. So in regards to the Blinn tennis courts and lighting, any questions or problems in supporting that one?
we're
No?
not asking to support it.
No. Any questions or problems with?
When we have the actual discussion for each, because there is going to be a point in time where we have to vote up or down on everything, are we going to have, if it's a project, all the data? And I mean, I'm assuming that we're going to have that sometime before the 17th,
Well,
or
see,
maybe at the
that's
17th or something.
Sort of what I'm trying to filter out here. If there's something specific you want on the Blinn tennis courts and lighting, I want to make sure that we know specifically what it is so that they can get it to us.
It's another piecemeal thing. This is not a $375,000 project, it's a $750,000 project, and we've yet to receive any real details on the entire project. As far as a form or a program placed before the board, they've been piecemealing this thing for the last 3 or 4 years, Marie. That's the real problem with this.
So what do you want us to get together on this before?
I'd like to see the whole package placed before, so we can see what it is.
Rich,
This-
my understanding is this appropriation will take care of the final product. So we can go out to bid after this appropriation is made. Now, whether there's more plans, if you want to see that, it is only expected in total, because we have 300 that's already put aside, and this will give us the 375 more to take care of the total project.
Yeah, and I understand that, Paul. I guess specifically, my problem is, this thing's been going on for 3 years, and they keep running back and getting approval on 100,000 and putting it on the shelf, and they come back in next year for another 250,000, then they come in for 300,000, and it's now up to 750, and we still don't have anything placed before us that shows a master plan on what exactly is going to be done. Really, what are we doing?
So the moral of the story is, we should have approved it 3 years ago, and it would have been done for $250,000.
It was less than that, Mark. It was 140-some thousand when it first
I mean,
started.
So the question is, we approve this, is it not gonna be done, and next year they're gonna come back? I mean, is your question, if we authorize this, is it not gonna get done, and next year they're gonna come back to us and say, I need more money? Because that's what's happened each of the last 2 years.
I'm starting to question whether it'll ever be done. I mean, it's just been stacking money on the shelf, and it's a very inappropriate way to put a project together. And it's like we talked before, on the exhaust fans of one of our school, $45,000 last year, supposed to take care of it, and here's another $26,000 this year. Like, where did they come from? Why weren't they there last year? It's this piecemeal approach that is very poor programming.
The other thing I'd say is the design and the estimate were in the capital planning packet that we all received. And I think because of the expense of it and this costs on it have grown as the design has advanced and the project has matured. This will be ready to be bid this year. But because of the cost of the project, if you did it in just 1 year, you could do no other projects in that year. And so the reason why you stack money is so you don't stop other projects that are timely and needed from going forward in the same year as well.
May I speak?
No.
I agree with you, but that's still no excuse for this piecemeal approach. This has not been designed, this has been piecemealed since it started. We still don't, I can't even envision what type of lighting system is going to be up there and whether we'll get a public outcry once we light them up. We're talking about a whole revision of the lighting system. We haven't seen a proposal, we've seen no cut sheets. I understand your point, but you must understand my point too. This thing's been piecemealed up to where we got so much money now stacked on a thing that we end up doing the project, whether it needs to be done or not, in this fashion. That's my problem with it,
The
Steve.
Community Preservation Committee was satisfied with the explanation of the project.
Well, I'm
from
very,
DPW,
very,
so
very satisfied that
I-
they were satisfied, but I'm not satisfied with what I've seen. So I don't care what the other
Okay,
committees have
then
said
we'll
they're
discuss-
satisfied
We'll
with.
discuss the article, we can do that, and we'll have
I
better information
I would
for
think
you.
this discussion would prompt you to start asking some questions of the people to get something into this board. This is not the first time this has been brought up. This is multiple requests to see a whole project placed before us instead of piecemeal.
Okay. So, what you said was helpful here. You want to know the lighting system proposals, the cut sheets, you want to see the whole
Marie, for
project.
instance, they're proposing a lighting system. Nobody's even talked about this lighting system. Okay? We have no idea what it is, and the general public doesn't have any idea. It's possible this lighting system they're proposing is going to be like a spaceship coming in on that place when it lights up at night compared to what we have now. They're going to be a total different lighting system. I think we owe it to the public to get this out, and somebody explain this project in full detail. I mean, we're going a total different lighting pattern up there.
Anything else we should make sure we get together?
Pardon?
Anything else
You
we should
trying to
be
stop
asking?
me from talking?
No, I'm trying to,
Oh.
I'm trying to get everything that, what I'm hoping to do is get all the information that people are looking for so it can be produced and instead
Possible.
of.
I mean, it's
yeah.
possible somebody made the comment that the lighting system is out of this world, which maybe led to the comment that it could be a space station.
It may be.
I'm sorry.
And another thing, which brings it up, and Stephen brought up a very good point. I've always been frustrated with this from capital planning. I think Mark had the same frustration when he was there, but it's even worse now, is that we take these projects and we split them two different directions, and we get funding pieces coming in from two different directions, and all of a sudden, we have a project that manifests itself from two different directions with support from two different committees. And neither committee might not understand the interconnected pieces of it because they've not been privy to the whole project. They've just been privy, like this one here was a $375,000 proposal made this year just for lighting.
Yeah.
The committee now that approved that may not have any connection with what was approved before. This is a very poor way to do project development. This thing should have been one big package and then go for the pieces, I agree with you, piece it
Okay.
together. But at least put the whole thing together. I can go back, this thing started at less than 100,000, Stephen.
Before my time, I hear you, and
It did.
yeah, and I know I hear you, and I've gone through and you know, like I said, I don't have the memo in front, the packet in front of me, but there is an explanation of the project and some supplementary information that was submitted to the Community Preservation Act Committee by request that really fully explains it. Now, the lighting system and the condition of energy efficient lighting, that I don't recall being a part of the Community Preservation Act vote, but we'll certainly look into it, Richard. I mean, I think to your point, I was aware that coming into this process, the capital planning process, there was somewhat of a disconnect. And one of the things we focused on was getting those committees together in the same room and talking it out and figuring out who's going, you know, and I think when the capital planning committee and the community preservation act committee presented to the board a couple of weeks ago, you know, it was clear that they had discussed things previously, and basically it was the capital planning committee viewed some of the projects that were requested as things that should be approved by the Community Preservation Act committee, and the opposite was also true. And I think the bottom line is a lot of really good projects got approved. A lot of really good projects got recommended by both committees to be funded one way or the other, and I'll go through that a little bit in my budget presentation if I
Okay.
get to it.
Mark?
Yeah, if Steve and this does predate you by several years, that's how long this has been going on, but if you are gonna have some more details about the project, I think it's important that as part of this warrant article, people understand timing as well. There's a lot going with our tennis team that uses it, the high school tennis team, people who wanna use it in the summertime, the winter, fall, and whether you can do things. I think it's important that as people go to review this project, that they understand when we're likely to do it and what the impact will be on potential users of it.
Okay.
I just have one very tiny thing. This says estimated at $675,000. The last paperwork I have on this project, it's estimated at $750,000.
They did revise it down after they took some scope out. I think sidewalks and some of the site work that was going to be lumped into the general contract they took out that we can do in-house.
Okay, $75,000 reduction. How are they,
There's a memo on that that explains that. to
but I
the
mean,
dollar
aren't they
stuff
gonna
that we-
need money? They just gonna suck up $75,000?
Hmm?
They're just gonna suck up $75,000? Do it
They re-
in-house?
They reduced the scope, yeah.
It didn't have to do with less paving the parking lot,
There's some
sidewalks?
sidewalk, less paving, I mean, some marginal adjustments to the site.
Okay, we'll look to get a more complete proposal before we go over that on the 17th. Article 12 is another CPA project to resurface the track at the Long Meadow High School for the amount of $87,500. Any questions or problems with Article 12? No? Okay, Article 13, town will vote for another CPC project to renovate and improve the Wolf Swamp Fields to the amount of $35,000 to be funded from open space fund balance. Any questions?
Yeah, we're not voting on them tonight anyway, so I'll just,
No, it's to get information.
yeah, well, there is no information. There's no definition of what we're doing here. I don't know what the 35 is being used for, Marie.
Okay.
Topsoil and seed,
So,
and labor.
Well, not labor. Labor's already paid for by base wages in our budget. It's already been approved. You can't use your workforce to gain labor.
Okay.
You can buy supplies and
And it's
materials. with it.
topsoil and seed.
Okay, topsoil and seed, that would put 3 inches of topsoil on 5.6 acres of ground.
Your big fields, Richard. What kind of-
See, this is why I keep asking.
Okay.
so, Marie, actually, this is more of a question for Mark. No, Mark, this was up for vote last year, right?
It was a very different project.
Very different.
Okay, that was my question. Is this, maybe you
Yeah,
don't know enough
I
about
do.
it?
Last year's project included changes to the parking lot,
Right.
raising the fencing many, many feet. And
Right.
all this is turning the fields and turning 2 softball fields
Changing.
into soccer, lacrosse fields
So
and
it's not
turning them.
changing the alignment?
It doesn't change
That was your
the street
objection last year,
appearance,
right?
or it doesn't change the parking
it's-
system, it doesn't change any of the barricades along the street, any of
Okay.
that. That was my concern, right?
Yeah.
Richard?
And my only concern is that this is $35,000. And I have looked at the package. There are absolutely zero details except what Mark said, topsoil, seed, fertilizer, and lime. But there's absolutely no real definition on what this project's going to be. There's no cost estimate. And I just cannot understand why it would be prudent management to authorize $35,000 expenditures without details.
But if you go to the CPA website, they have the proposal,
I looked at it.
and I thought there was a dollar bid on it.
It's just $35,000.
Oh, okay, I thought.
Yeah, it's just that
All
sum,
right.
35 for, and I think it says for topsoil, fertilizer, seed, and lime. That's why I took the opportunity to do the math on the topsoil.
Any other questions on Article 13? Okay, Article 14, CPC project improvements to community house, the amount of $54,000. And it's talking about refinishing of the stage and balcony, hardwood floors, stairs, repair, painting. Any questions or problems?
You don't want to hear them, Marie.
I always want to hear. Richard.
Well, again, a lot of this work in here is maintenance.
Okay.
When I looked at the proposal, it's not what you normally would think. It's just a fact of lack of maintenance. And, they're going to refinish some elements in there, and you wonder, what is the future use of the building? Is it an appropriate use of dollars to refinish some of those elements? What's the end result going to be? And that's been undefined, and no one wants to talk about that. I told you didn't want to listen to me.
I do, and I'm taking notes. Any other questions? Okay, Article 15, fund CPC project to restore and preserve ancient burial markers at the Long Meadow Cemetery, the amount of $30,080. And any questions or problems with that article? No? Article 16, another CPC project to install docks and security system at the town-owned Connecticut River to facilitate boat access for $11,700. Any questions?
The only questions I have on that is if someone could provide the details of who's going to take care of that once it's installed and ongoing security and that type of thing.
Yeah, and the routine maintenance too, I think that was brought up when Steve was here. And is this thing been vetted through, do you know, is there permits and all that? Has that all been cleared that we can actually do this thing?
Not that I'm aware of.
I didn't
That was
see
a question I
these.
had, but this was not, I don't believe this was a,
This was a petition, wasn't it?
yeah, I don't believe, before I.
CPC?
Yeah,
It was a rec committee, it was a rec committee, it was not a,
Bill Hoff brought it.
Bill Hoff brought it.
It's not a town, it's not a DPW town
Right.
request, it's a
Right,
citizen
right.
request, yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, Maria, if they've done all the prior work to have this thing
Okay.
put in, and that was just a question, not so much a fact of the need, because it's likely a good project. But there are some questions, it's gonna put a maintenance workload on Mike.
Well, I was wondering about you touch water and there's a pretty
That's what-
high permitting
that's what I
hurdle,
was
and I'm not
thinking,
aware
too.
that that's happened either.
Yeah, yeah, thou touch the water, thou permit.
Okay, we'll look into it. Article 17 is another CPC project for the preservation of town records for $20,000. Any questions or more information or problems with that one?
I have one question. Is this gonna finish it on the records? Because this, well, how much, I wonder why we just don't get the whole thing together and get it one piece.
I mean, it's not only the town records, and we have records, we had a presentation last week, and there's town records that we have down there for payroll records that
Yeah.
are permanent records. This is just taking care of some of the town clerk stuff and some other departments, but it's going to be an ongoing, it almost needs to be a budget item from an annual appropriation to get a good handle on this in many years, but this is just putting a dent in it at best.
And that was my feelings too, Paul, is that, and this is 2 years with this. So again, it's like piecemealing without the whole picture being examined. And do you have a whole picture yet on how big this is?
I don't. I mean, I can get it, I can see what else is there that Catherine would need, but there's some huge needs within the HR department for their records also.
Well, it's an extremely valuable project to get these records archived properly and get them preserved.
We're working on a cost estimate for the HR department, but
Right.
this is strictly for Catherine and the city, the town clerks and, a few other odds and ends from other departments.
Do we have proper fire suppression in this area in case something should unforeseen happen?
It's basically in the basement. I do not believe there is much, if any, fire suppression.
Yeah. You see what I mean, Stephen? I see this one brings a lot of concern to me because once it's gone, it's gone. And piecemealing it at $20,000 a year, I'm surprised they didn't come in for $50,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000, because I know you've got to have a lot of records that need to be archived.
Paul?
Al?
Paul, when I've seen this article before, I've assumed it's sort of historic records, from a long time ago that have significant value. When I'm hearing about payroll records, I'm kind of wondering, is this something that anybody would ever want, would some historian want to see this sort of thing? Or does this have an entirely different purpose?
This, I think, has, what is before you is more of the historic preservation that might be
Okay.
of value with old town records, meeting minutes, things of that nature.
Yeah.
The payroll records, I don't think would be ever, I mean, it could be authorized by the CPC, but I doubt that it would be under historic preservation. I just don't see that falling into a, historical need
Right,
as opposed to
yeah.
a permanent need required by the, the state, Secretary of
Sure.
State. So we would have to find a different funding source for those other.
Or just wait a really
Areas.
long time.
Yeah. He was the first employee. Your point's well taken, though, that when you mentioned payroll record, I didn't expect to hear him say that, because we were really talking about the real hardcore historic records
Right.
of the community.
Yeah.
Marriage certificates and all that stuff, and births and all
Birth
that.
certificate deaths, again, town meetings.
Yeah.
Minutes of the select board, they're gonna be archiving, things of that nature.
Boy. That's a winner.
After they're approved, though.
Yeah, after they're approved.
Okay, Article 18, vote to CPC project for restoration and preservation of Stores House in the amount of $37,207 for converting the cellar to enhance storage category, cataloging, and preservation. Any questions or problems?
I had one question on that one, Marie, too. And Stephen may have updated information. The original statement I read, they talked about there being mold and stuff down in there.
No, the lady who was working on this actually went down there and, much to my surprise, said, "Oh, it's good space. You just have to do some reshelving and things like that." So I think that was, I don't know, a misunderstanding, or I mean, certainly get down there. It's dark and cold, and it's a basement of an old building with
Right.
probably a stone foundation. But No, the woman who's working on us said, yeah, you can use, because we were trying to find sites to put the stuff. And she said, no, you just need to reconfigure the shelving and everything, and you can still store the stuff down there, so that was good.
My concern was, did this scope actually take care of the entire problem? Because if they got into mold mitigation and that kind of stuff, because that was the original paperwork mentioned that. And I had that question when Steve was in there, and I didn't get a chance to ask him, so, but you don't think it's an issue now, Steve? Okay.
Okay, Article 19, a CPC project to install a walking trail and exercise stations at Greenwood Park in the amount of $51,970. Any question or problems in regards to that?
You know,
Alex?
I don't know, maybe somebody else knows this, but I was looking at these projects before the CPC meeting. I'm not sure, was there a map that showed where this trail was going to be?
Yes.
Yeah.
There was?
It's just kind of around the outside.
All right, okay.
Did you want to see that?
Well, it was just a reminder, if it's on the CPC website, then I can look at it.
Okay. All right, Article 20, CPC project for a standby generator Genesis House in the amount of $55,940. Any questions or problems with Article 20? No? Article 21, town to vote to amend the demolition delay bylaw definition of commission by adding the following language: the 4 at-large members of the Long Meadow Building Demolition Committee to be appointed by the Select Board, 2 members to be appointed for a term of 1 year and thereafter a term of 3 years, 2 members to be appointed for a term of 2 years thereafter for a term of 3 years, and they should meet at least once in a calendar year. Any questions or problems with the bylaw change?
I'd like to see us determine whether or not we need that committee and perhaps have a bylaw that would eliminate it.
Actually, I think we're required by the
No,
state
we're
to
not.
have one.
No, that was
We
at town
created it
meeting,
after the Martinelli house.
when Attorney Martinelli knocked down his house because he couldn't sell it, so he created building lots. And the residents in that area got together and put this on a petition article for a town meeting, which could withhold someone demolishing their home, and it has to be within after a certain, built before a certain date, I should say, for a period of 1 year. It was just a knee-jerk reaction to a resident who was having trouble selling his house and maximized it by having building lots and something perfectly legal, nothing that was done, but it upset the people that were abutting them. And that's where this came from. It is not a requirement of the state. And the fact that it hasn't met since that time, which I believe 6, 8 years ago, somewhere around there. It was a while.
Is that
5
true?
years ago, for sure.
Is that true? I mean, because we interviewed people for that.
We did.
They have
meet.
not met since that point, since that committee was originally formed, because they were to meet only when the building was going to be demolished. So,
My understanding is these building demolition committees exist throughout the Commonwealth. I will look to see what the statutory basis
I'm
of them
telling you
are.
that is how it was formed at town meeting, as a citizen's petition, as a knee-jerk reaction to one person who knocked down their home.
And was that at Forest Glen and Laurel?
Yes.
All right.
Because
Any other?
just the fact that they haven't met and we didn't even know what terms expired really is to my point of, do we actually need that committee? And again, it would still have to go to town meeting to dismantle the bylaw.
Exactly, you would need
Right.
to. A charter committee could
No.
put that forward.
No, this was done at town meeting, we
Yeah.
need town meeting to undo it.
No, I'm saying they would decide to put in the bylaws changes. Article 22, transfer funds from the Treasury in the sum of $35,000. Study of options of truly suitable space and facilities for the Long Meadow Council on Aging. And this, I believe, is the citizen's petition.
Yes, it should say citizen petition.
Does it really?
Yeah. Any question or regards to that?
I don't, if it's a citizen's petition. we
There is
don't
no
have a choice.
question.
Okay, Article 23,
Another
and
citizen's
is
petition.
the Long Meadow Building Demolition Committee a citizen's petition also?
I don't
Changes?
believe so.
Who initiated it?
Was it signed by, I think that was initiated by
Isn't that when
the,
because when we
historic
appointed those people,
commissions.
you know, when we appointed those 2 people, it was discovered that there was no terms.
right, I
And
know,
I
but,
think we'd asked the attorney, the town council, to amend the bylaw to put terms on the committee
okay,
members.
so they didn't have it signed by, committee
Not that I'm aware of,
by
but
town.
I thought this is one we generated internally.
oh, okay. Article 23 is the citizen's petition in regards to fluoridation of public water supply. Okay.
Historically, when there's been a citizen's petition, we've been given a copy of that petition. Can we just get a copy of those two citizens' petitions if we
Okay.
could, electronically? I don't need it on paper. And I'd like to ask if we can look into creating a bylaw.
Oh, so you're talking about, now that we're done with this, you're talking about an additional
I'm talking about a
articles.
select board bylaw that I'd like to see the board undertake.
Okay.
This was pulled out of my snow blower during the last storm we had.
I had one of those too.
Just like
What is
that.
it?
Yeah, in the bag. Mine was in a plastic bag.
Mine's
No,
in
mine
much-
wasn't. There was no plastic bag. And the problem is, fortunately, my snow blower was big enough where it just died and I was able to pull it out and start it. Two of my neighbors had decent damage to their snow blowers for the same thing that was delivered on my street that day. I find it, we have anti-littering laws, and this was, Mr. Maz is here from the Reminder, and the Reminder's been delivered during snowstorms, and that sucker just shoots through my snow blower because it's big enough to handle it, but it leaves a nice mess for the springtime. I would like to ask the board to propose and adopt a bylaw that would require anybody who's going to deliver things like this, or the Reminder, or whatever, that it is an opt-in provision by someone as opposed to an opt-out. I really have an issue with things being dropped off at my front door, whether it's some pretend Long Meadow News flyer that's, looks like a Long Meadow newspaper and ends up being a promotional flyer that's just thrown on my front lawn. And I think there's things that you can opt in for and have, I think you can even opt out of the Reminder, but I think for most people, when I drive up and down streets, I see reminders that are out there, or whatever, newspapers that aren't subscribed to, sitting there for days at a time, especially in the summertime, when people are away on vacation. But things like phone books, political material, that there is no free speech, that you come onto my property to deliver your material. And I think, those folks should have to be required to fill out a permit to deliver their material, and it should be an opt-in for Long Meadow residents to receive that. There's do not call registries for people to stop the solicitations, but there's nothing to stop someone from coming hanging a flyer on your doorknob, or that, and that's being polite, I guess. There's, nothing wrong from people throwing things on your front step and walking away
Why don't
for
you-
whatever promotional.
Why don't you write something and run it by Dave Martell to make sure we're not into any problems, and you can bring it.
I don't know if there's any problems. I would like to, Stephen, I'll send you something that I'm looking for, unless you have something that you can design, but I just
would
think,
do that. I mean, I think that, I do believe there may be broader land use laws at play here. So I will, I think I would just go to Dave Martell and ask.
Yeah.
But if you want just a brief outline of bullets or something like that, we can send it along.
Anything else?
Yeah,
Richard?
that phone book's in far better shape than the one that went through mine. Could I please have that?
you want that
No,
one?
they apparently were deposited during a storm, or right at the beginning, and I agree, I hit one late helping a neighbor, and it took me an hour and a half to get it out of my...
Mine was easy, because mine was big enough, but it was, we didn't know what happened, but I found out later, two neighbors were out of service
Right,
for that storm.
yeah, I mean, it really, mine bound up bad, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I've had days where the Reminder goes flying about 15, 20 feet. It does have some good trajectory, Chris. I mean, but it does leave a nice mess come springtime.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a heck of a ride when you see it coming out of your blower, but it's nice to pick up in the
Yeah.
springtime, so. I just think that there should be some protection for residents who, like I said, my snow blower is fine. I don't know if my neighbors actually had to have repairs done to them. And to me, that's, if someone came and threw a can out in the street, a police officer could fine that person for littering. But if they come and deliver a phone book that you don't want, or a newspaper, or some periodical, like I said, it's a sales piece, but it's designed to look like a newspaper. I got this thing that said it was the Long Meadow News, not the Long Meadow newspaper, but something, and it was just nothing but sales articles in there. But, so those things are just thrown on your front step. And I don't think anybody has the right to do that, but there might be some other implications, I'm sure.
And, Stephen, didn't you say, so we've got a placeholder in
From your
here
lawn?
for the bylaw for
Town property,
The,
yes, not on my side, not on my phone.
dispensary, marijuana dispensaries?
Because
is
we are
gonna be
working
in.
on one.
Is there
yeah.
anything else that we should be seeing coming
Board
down?
and commission vacancies, do we do that one?
No, we didn't.
Yeah, Attorney Martell and I are meeting Wednesday to go over a series of bylaws, board and committee vacancies, vacant and abandoned property bylaws, one that's been asked for. So there's a handful of things that are kind of on the docket, if you will.
As soon as you get those, can you send those, so we'll have those and be able to get our questions together before the next time we meet to close the warrant? I'm trying to avoid us having all these questions and then we don't really feel comfortable passing warrants. All right, so any other question on the warrants? No? Okay, we'll move on to the budget presentation. You're going to be doing this, right?
Yes.
So I'll trade places with you.
I'll go sit over by Mr. Kostarzik.
Oh, thank you, Paul. Actually, that's in good shape. Mine was in little pieces like this. Did I rip?
The reminder killed my snowball.
Oh, this one was terrible.
This, I've been trying to keep
Yeah,
that
this is
for you.
actually usable.
You can have one from my house.
Why did they even deliver these anymore? I go to the internet, I wouldn't even consider looking up the number in there.
Good question.
Yeah, I just,
Well, it's not as useful anymore, because
No.
it's put residential.
no, you're right, it's not near as used as it used to be. Yeah, Paul chewed that one up pretty dry.
As we all leave.
Excuse me. Okay, well, it's my pleasure to present the initial town manager recommendation for the fiscal year 2015 town budget. The presentation is really just a brief graphical illustration of what you received in your packet on Friday. Actually, really the budget message you received on Wednesday is really most of the information that's in here. In the packet you received on Friday, there was a cover memo from Paul that kind of, spelled out that with the first go-around of this substantially larger new budget format, this is a work in progress. To some extent, numbers get tweaked here and there, but nothing major will move. Obviously, it'll all be finalized in time for the printing of the town meeting warrant. We are reviewing internally the question of printing and distributing this information because of its size. It could add many thousands of dollars to that cost. So we're trying to figure out some ways to get the information to the public without going way over budget. So I'll just get right into it then. Just an overall, I hope everybody can read that. Just an overall summary. You can see that this is a summary of the general fund, and the general fund budget is about $54 million. As you can see, the schools are 58% of the total. The next largest percentage is employee benefits. And from there, I believe it's public safety, debt service and public works are about the same. Community service and general government are about the same, and then planning and community development. So, the schools did present their budget a few weeks ago, and I believe you have that information, should have that information. It is available on the school's website, if not. So we also broke it down by spending categories, and this is all funds. So this is the total town budget, including enterprise funds and other things. The total town budget is 62.3 million essentially. As you can see, salaries, benefits, and debt service are the major components of the budget. And one of the ways I like to think about the municipal budget is what is fixed versus what is flexible. And salaries, employee benefits, and debt service are three major components that are largely fixed either by contract or other kind of agreement. Now, certainly how many people you have doing the work is flexible, but to go with a base level budget and continue to provide the same services we are, the amount that employees get paid and the cost of their benefits is largely fixed, and of course debt service is fixed by the conditions of borrowing. So that would leave out of 62.3 about 14.7 million as what could be considered flexible, but even within that 14 million, there are things that are vehicle maintenance and repair, service contracts for equipment, things like that. So it really is not altogether that flexible either. You could certainly eliminate those costs, but there would be either a commensurate elimination or reduction in the quality of service. So it just illustrates how much of the budget really is obligated to specific things. So, excuse me. So the first general fund, and for the purposes of these next few slides, we really focus on the general fund budget. And enterprise funds are not included. The analogy of the pie is our Prop 2.5 levy. Enterprise funds aren't necessarily a pie because they are revenue and fee based. They're user fees associated with them. So this is really focusing again on the Prop 2.5 levy and our general fund budget. So you can see general government is about 91,000 more. It's about $1.5 million. One of the big drivers of that increase is in the clerk's office. There are 2 more elections than there were last year, and so that's one of those items that kind of goes up and down every other year. As noted, there are step increases and cost of living adjustments that are obligated to employees, especially on the general government side, and that is a cost driver as well. And replenishing the reserve fund that the Finance Committee oversees is another driver of the increase. So it's again, it's about 3% of the budget. So for public safety, about 2.7 million, about a $30,000 increase. Again, we have contractual increases for patrol officers who we settled with a few months ago. And then there is an increase in the crossing guard program. During FY 2014, a crossing guard supervisor was added, which has helped the program. But as I report in the packet, we're still trying to find better ways to sustain the program. Fire department has a $2 million budget. Again, a $47,000 increase, largely tied to step increases in COLAs. There is an increase. The percentage is a high level of increase for vehicle maintenance. The overall dollar amount isn't that substantial. It is offset by other reductions, and that increase is needed because the fleet is aging, and obviously when equipment ages, it's more frequent and more costly to maintain. Both of these are base level or level service budgets. Planning and community development obviously is a very small percentage of our budget. This is building department, health, board of health functions, things like that. One of the, again, and some of the things that are highlighted here is if you run down the line item budget that you received, there are certain categories that if you just looked at the percentages, went up significantly, even if, like I said, the dollar amounts aren't all that great. We just wanted to, what we did was we went down the same way and just said, well, if something seemed like a high percentage increase, we wanted to kind of offer some level of explanation for that. At the time the budget was developed, one of the full-time employees in the building department was going to be out for a sustained amount of time. We weren't sure how long, so we built the increase in. I would also note that the building department's will be transitioning to a new software program to automate some of the functions that are manual now, and we anticipate possibly some additional extra temporary help to facilitate that process. So that's, again, a modest amount of, not even modest, very small amount of money, but the percentage was what jumps out. So the schools, the general fund portion of the budget overall is an increase of 2.3%. You can see schools, like I said, are almost 60% of the budget. This, as I noted in my message, is not technically, it is not a base level budget. The school does expand services in their budget proposal that the school committee adopted. However, they, in their budget proposal, have included offsets that bring the overall impact to the general fund within line of the budget directive, within the spirit of the budget directive, even if it is not within the letter of the directive. So, I think that's a positive thing is what has enabled, is one of the probably primary factors in us being able to deliver a balanced budget. So for Public Works, it's about a $3.5 million budget. The increase for the department is 6%. This is there are some recommendations in here that are beyond base level. One of the big increases on the general fund is reallocation of DPW employee time. There are employees that are paid partially through enterprise funds. If there's someone on the street crew who is an equipment operator, runs a backhoe, and that person is involved in digging a trench to repair a water main, then that time gets charged to the water utility. If they are digging a trench or if they're digging up around storm inlet, then that time is charged to the general fund. And the time allocations were, better data was collected on that last year, and so we are using that data to create a three-step process because it's a significant impact on the general fund to do it in 1 year, and so by looking at a 3-year transition, it accomplishes a few goals. Well, first is to continue to collect data so we can have more than just a 1-year snapshot to see what the allocations are. And again, the second is to minimize impact. And I would note that this is not as a result of a qualified opinion from our auditors. It was not really raised as an issue by our independent audit. It was more an issue of the audit committee and the select board. And we certainly want to be straightforward with how we utilize and pay for the time of the employees. So that's a big cost increase. We are recommending adding an additional seasonal long-term employee for grounds division. That I think, to me, that is both. I think that could serve to possibly reduce overtime expenditures in the department, and I also think it is. And we talk about investment in capital and in our infrastructure. Having an additional employee, especially with some of the deficiencies that have been identified in the parks, I think this will help address some of that deficit. And then finally, it's an additional almost $47,000 in increase for the new high school. There's a substantial amount of additional landscaping. The HVAC systems have many filters that need to be changed regularly, and that is a new expense. Some of the cost increase are for contracted services, because again, through the analysis, it was determined that outsourcing some additional maintenance functions would be a better value. Community services, this is about a $30,000 increase. A huge chunk of that is an increase in our budget for veterans benefits. Our veterans agent has increased his caseload 300% by really getting out and finding veterans and or widows who had not been receiving benefits that they had earned. And we have to provide those benefits out of the town budget. They do get reimbursed 75% by the state, but there's a year-plus backlog on that, so we carry it in the budget. The revenue may come in the next fiscal year. We are also recommending, and this is now, this is slightly beyond base level as well, we are recommending 5 more hours for the Council on Aging Director, which would enable the center to be open 5 additional hours during the week as well. We feel that this is a small but affordable measure to increase our commitment to the senior population, and the director's has been expanding program offerings in a very popular way for seniors, and we want to support that continued effort. The overall Parks and Rec budget is reduced by almost $14,000, and a lot of that is tied to declining revenue from enrollment at the daycare center that is going down. Employee benefits, and then the liability and property insurance. That's, again, it's $7.2 million. It's a huge cost driver in our budget. On the positive side, Scantic Valley just let us know that there were going to be a 0% increase in our health insurance premiums. That's very, very good news, and I commend Scantic Valley for doing that, for sharing favorable financial status on their end with the community, with the member communities, by having a 0% premium increase. They also had made the change effective earlier in January 1st of this year to go to, I guess, what was known as an egg whip. Instead of paying for prescription drugs up front, it's done on a reimbursement basis, or do I have it the other way?
It's dealing with the premium and how the prescription drugs are handled. They won't be a reimbursable part, but we built into the premium
Right.
up front, which is far more advantageous.
And it's a significant amount of savings. It started mid-year, and we think we'll save $60,000 from January 1st to June 30th. So projected over a full fiscal year, it'd be $120,000 in savings. The Hampden County Retirement Board, however, has issued an assessment, an increase in their assessment that is higher than we initially projected was going to be. And we also discovered that there had been underreporting in payroll, which adds to the increase in the cost, a clerical error. And we don't expect there to be a penalty or anything, but now that we've rectified it, it has increased the contribution for retirement. And then we have increased our contribution we're making to our OPEB account, or our money we're setting aside for OPEB. And then our liability insurance is going up as well, largely due to the cost to insure the high school. So debt service, we're recommending about $3.8 million. In debt service, the amount of debt service that is subject to an exclusion is actually going down $227,000. The debt service that is within our levy limit is going up about $61,000. So overall debt service is going down, but the amount that, like I said, is subject to the general fund levy is going up. So capital expenditures, we've heard from both. I've made my recommendation. The Capital Planning Committee has made theirs. The Community Preservation Act has made theirs. We just saw those in the warrant articles. The community preservation ones are not featured in the for this presentation. But for general fund purposes, there's about $3.3 million in recommended projects. You can see that's about 2.5 for the for capital projects, and then $720 for the quint. 2% of general funds expenditures per the policy is about $1.1 million. We were able to achieve about $153,000 in levy capacity that we could have available for additional capital. That would be equivalent of about, of debt service, annual debt service on a $1.2 million or $1.3 million bond. So if you took that approach, if you took our recommended approach, between a bond and the 2%, you'd be up to about 2.4 million. We are pursuing contributions for the Quint from some of our tax exempt large property owners, and that effort is ongoing per the select board directive. We will have certified free cash that's projecting to be better than last year, or better than FY14 free cash. There is funds set aside in the truck fund that could be tapped, although I will note that the balance is not sufficient to purchase an entire apparatus, and the Quint is replacing a truck that is, I think, 24 years old. The next line engine is, I think, 22 or 23, so there'll be another truck purchase coming in the very near future, so we want to watch carefully how we access the truck fund. And then revenues could come in higher than we're projecting, as we've noted. We project revenues conservatively so we don't end up with a shortfall. But the bottom line is, Paul and I believe that even though we can't really assign dollar for dollar as we sit here tonight, through a combination of these factors, the capital improvement plan that was recommended can be funded for FY15. So that very brief overview. You have obviously a substantial amount of more detail in your packets. I'll open up to questions.
Paul, if I can ask the first question while we're getting settled. I actually went to go look for the school budget online. I couldn't find it. All I found was the budget slideshow, not the actual school committee budget. Do you know, because I emailed Tom Maz, I haven't heard back. Is it online, their actual line item budget?
I thought I found it.
Okay. All I found was
If you can't find it, let me know, we'll make you a copy.
yeah, I thought I could just look at it or download it from there. But
I could probably find it here.
the other question I have is, I wrote the number down. You said, just a broad number, that 54 million was the general fund, but only of the budget, 58% was only attributable to school budget. And I understand the GFOA was supposed to be a little bit more clear and all that. I thought under GFOA, we were actually supposed to assign, not necessarily put in the school budget, but assign the value of employee benefits, because I tend to believe that the school number is far larger than 58%.
That 58% is just their direct operating budget, obviously. If we added the debt service and employee benefits, you're 70%, 75% plus or minus.
Right, and we're still, the bonding for the high school is not in the school budget, it's on the town
That is correct.
general
It's in
fund
the
ledger and
debt
so
service
forth.
section.
Okay.
Marie, I would assume that we're going to have another opportunity to discuss this budget with the town
Yes.
manager, since we've had this for a very limited amount of time.
Right. Mark?
Yeah, just in terms of generalities, one of the larger increases was the Hampden County Retirement Board assessment. And I guess if Long Meadow's getting assessed $358,000, I got to assume that the overall retirement board's increases are pretty substantial. I assume that it's distributed based on number of employees and number of retirees who are participating or something like that.
The overall Hampden County retirement budget, because they are on a certain funding schedule where they increased it, I forget which exactly year, can only increase 8%, their total budget. What that additional cost to Long Meadow, the almost near doubling of that 8%, is the error that was made in our we were underestimating payroll in prior years. That has been corrected, and that is the effect of this correction. But again, their overall budget can only go up 8%.
Thank you.
And Paul, we talked about it, there was another presentation a few months ago about the Hampden County retirement. Have we ever looked at, because we're part of the prim and print, are the dollars actually invested, correct? I
The
thought that was
Hampden
transferred
County
over.
money is invested by the state, yes.
Right, so, and they're handling the administrative side of it. Isn't that what you-
To some degree, there's still administration of not necessarily the investments with all, but the pensions and things of that nature.
And there's a cost to it. So, and we have no say in technically in what they do, and,
We do not set their budget, it's board, they have a 5-member board that sets their internal budget with.
have we looked at whether or not internally it might be worth it for the town to administer the retirement plan as opposed to Hampden County, in which we have no control over?
We have not, but I will say that there are very few committees, or very few communities the size of Long Meadow that have their own separate retirement system. It's usually the cities.
Yeah.
And there might be some larger towns, but it's usually the cities that have their own systems. We have never looked into it, though.
Okay, because I think a lot of what goes on there is, in terms of hirings and things like that, is there's a lot of politics at that retirement board, and without getting into specifics, I think that, sometimes you look at the cost that it takes to administer the retirement plan, because we get our assessment from them besides,
Right.
so
Yep.
I don't know at some point where it becomes cheaper or less expensive for the town to do it versus them.
Any other questions? Okay.
Marie, I had a question about the crossing guards, but is that part of his town manager report, or?
Well, no, he mentioned are you talking about the $11,000 increase?
Well, I'm looking at this memo that we got, crossing guard update. Is this the
That would
time
be,
to talk
that
about
would be
them?
town manager reports.
Okay.
Any questions on the budget presentation?
All right, and then the GPS units.
Also in the town manager's report.
Okay, gotcha.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
When will we have the next opportunity to talk with Stephen about this?
About the budget? Well, we can talk about that when we get down to the budget schedule. So that's the very next item.
Okay.
Thank you very much on the presentation. It was great. And in regards to the budget schedule, I sent everyone a list out there. I was trying to give us as much room to grow. And so I had 3 dates that I picked out. Today was just the basic presentation. And the other dates I sent out were, let me pull out my calendar. The following week, which I was looking at 10th, 11th, 12th. Were those the 3 days? And I wanted to give us as much time to go over it, and I understood that we had gone backwards. I sat down with Paul and Stephen and going backwards and seeing when things actually had to be done, and we had to hand them over, and we were also concerned about publishing dates. So what I was looking at was starting to look at it on the 10th. I set aside the 11th because it was important to have the forum before we continued to talk about the budget. And so I had the budget dates going for the 12th and the 13th. So we had 3 days for us to go through the budget. But I was sort of leaving room for us to continue on if we needed to the following week, although I had put temporarily us to vote the budget on the 17th if there weren't any problems. And were there any questions or problems in regards to the basic budget schedule?
This is the question I was asking before. So we're having the forum after, I guess, before we actually sort of dig into this.
Yeah. And the reason I understood, I had talked to some people, is that way we hear what residents' concerns are, because right now the budget has been put out there and our residents are also looking at it, and we could hear what their concerns are as we also delve in. But I gave us 1 day, or actually it's 2 days if you consider today, where we really try to get our hands into it a bit too. But the forum would be on the 11th, and we'll give everyone a chance to speak. Mark?
Yeah, I guess I guess I'd like to understand what we're going to do on the 10th, 12th, and 13th, and not specifically, but historically, what's happened is there have been some questions have arisen over line items. There have been suggestions or alternatives or even decisions made on modifications that then sometimes get implemented and we get a next version. I guess the question is, when you do that in consecutive days, I'm not worried about Paul working overtime to make the changes, but it's getting them back to it. Clearly, that's part of it. But also getting it back to us so we can see the impact or the effect of suggestions or changes or sometimes alternatives. That's the only concern I have about running consecutive days, is that sometimes you want to take a look at and just think about what you did.
And I think the reason I was looking at the consecutive days is that I understood historically, we've been doing it, and that's sort of going through line item by line item or department by department and really reviewing it. So I wanted to give us enough time to really do that, and not too much in one evening, so that they could come back with changes or suggestions.
I'm just suggesting we may need a couple of a second meeting the week of the 17th, that's all.
Is there a day or time that people prefer in regards to the week of the 17th?
I'd have to check my calendar.
Okay. Because I think it is worth it to book 2 more dates out, even if we have to cancel them, at least we know that they're...
What's wrong with the 24th? If we can do that in a consecutive week, I told you, I set aside Mondays, and my calendar's blocked for every Monday of the week, of every week. Having midweek, it interferes with work, and these are things that I have commitments to. I won't be here the 11th, 12th, or 13th, and nor would I be here on the 18th.
Okay.
But the 24th, one of the things that it really just gives the finance committee their minimum 7 days in order to come up with their recommendation or their...
But with all due respect, at a recent finance committee meeting, they basically said they don't want to look at the line items of the budget. So I don't know what they're going to vote on if they're not going to look at line items. And I'm less concerned about getting it to them as I am as having the time here to do it. And that's because I asked them, and they don't want to look at the line items.
Well, if we're looking about pushing the vote off on the budget from the 17th, you said you're not going to be here for the select board meeting on the 17th?
No, I'll be here.
No, Paul.
I said, Monday nights are set aside. I will be
Oh, so
here.
you are here the 17th, because Mark will not be here the 24th. Is there any day else that week we can put it in? If everyone could get back to me, check their schedules, and give me a day, we'll have the 17th, any other day that week that we could look for a subsequent meeting.
You can put me down as tentative approval on all the dates.
Okay, thank you.
Let all the other guys that are still working figure it out.
Okay. All right, so I'll wait to hear from everyone to try to put an extra day or two on the week of March 17th. Maybe we will get it done and be very efficient. But if there are any questions for Paul and the town manager, if we could try to pull those together before the week of the 10th, and maybe we'll have more productive dates going forward. Any other questions on the budget, or the budget schedule?
Do you want us to pre-submit all the questions we might have to these guys?
Something that might require them to pull work together for you?
Oh, full work together,
Yeah.
okay, other than, and explaining a figure or something,
Yeah.
because I know Paul can usually dream up an explanation for everything.
He's got it all in his hand.
It would obviously be more effective to do it that way.
Yeah, it would be helpful. We'd be able to, again, go to better sources and get involved in different departments.
So if you know what some of your questions are and you can send them to Paul ahead of time, that would be appreciated. And then we'll try to just go through it page by page, and starting on Monday, the 10th.
Gives him a lot of extra time to get his answer down pat.
That's right. Creative accounting, is that what you're suggesting?
Be too creative.
Okay, moving along, the next item on the agenda is the casino negotiations update, and I think a brief overview on where we are is that way back in, I believe, the end of November, a proposal was made by MGM, which would mirror the Agawam deal, is what we call it. And there's so much money per year, so much money upfront. And the total value, I believe, of that negotiated offer was 2.37. And there was 2.38, somewhere around there. And we had discussions about trying to look at the total number amount as well as the breakdown. There were some changes made in the look back in a subsequent offer the end of December. And there was actually no response to our offer, counter offer that occurred, I'd say, mid-December. Then we have still been in discussions and talks since then. There has been no change with the offer on MGM's side until this past week, when after the consultation, the designation was made, and MGC, that we are a surrounding community. We sat down and there was a change in the offer, and the offer was specific to, as they would describe it, the two intersections that were mentioned as the trigger points that the Mass Gaming Commission decided we were a designated community. And in response to that, they have, the offer was specifically to initial repairs to those two intersections, as well as a one-year look back and a percentage of anything that needed to be done on those intersections with a cap. And so the total value of the second offer that has been placed on the table is, I believe, 600?
I think it might be up to 700.
Up to 700,000. And that included the payment for our costs for consultations and attorneys. So that's where we are right now in the way of discussions, and we're still open to negotiations with MGM at this point. Any questions?
I have a comment.
Mhm.
Just so that people at home can understand, MGM gave us a worse deal after we were designated as a surrounding community. So not only did they not respond to our counteroffer, which was higher than the Agawam deal based on the facts that we had put forward, they're going back from the Agawam deal. They apparently think that they're sitting in the catbird seat, and I guess it's sometimes known as backward negotiating, when you retreat from the concessions that you've made before. So I think that's sort of the bigger picture that people at home ought to understand.
Well, I think that there was a change in the negotiations, as we said, the dollar amount, and it was looking that the designation at the Mass Gaming Commission, which our understanding from our attorney and consultants was that that was a on-off switch, that after looking at those two intersections, they decided we did meet the requirements of an impacted community, and the MGM decided that that meant those were the only two issues that could be considered. So so there were some changes in regards to the negotiations, but we're still in the process. Mark?
Yeah, I guess I have a comment and maybe a question, Marie. And my comment is that one of the things we've been criticized about is that our decisions have to come back to the entire select board for a decision that, whether it's a negotiating subgroup or subcommittee or individuals, doesn't have the authority to make the decision. And I guess my question is, or my observation also is MGM in somewhat of the same situation, that the people in the room don't have final authority to make the decision, or is that our perception, or do we have any reason to believe that they may not have the final decision? And secondly, who does have the final decision, and who might be the other players that are influencing MGM's side on this? Because I think if there's a negotiation going on, it may be of value for us to try to influence the decision makers instead of the people in the room. And as you can tell from this, as I read through some of the documents we're getting, I'm starting to think that there are alternate influencers that we ought to start working with.
Well, I think that it was made clear when our attorney said he had to return to the board, and the select board would have to make any decisions on any counteroffer, that they also have their clients, which was mentioned as MGM and also Springfield as being an important part of any negotiations.
So
And I think
I
that
just want
was,
to clarify
you know,
that what you're saying is that the city of Springfield has a say in our surrounding community agreement? Or MGM is claiming they do?
Well,
I
I
don't-
think
I don't
the
know.
original host agreement stated that Springfield did have some sort of involvement, but, go
Let me
ahead.
just jump in. This is something, Mark, that I think this question is, the answer to your questions could be one of the factors that could lead to a possible arbitration hearing on this matter. And so I think because we have, in the reality is we have a 30-day negotiating window under the statute, we're halfway through it. As Alex noted, we went backwards in some ways on the agreement that we had in front of us from MGM, which would, you know, which adds to the possibility that we will not reach a mutually negotiated agreement by the end of the window. I mean, I'm not speculating. I mean, to some extent, it's still speculation, but I think signs are pointing in that direction based on what we've seen. So I guess what I would say is let's hold off and perhaps ask Art, because our attorney will be on with us on the phone in executive session.
You're right, and my intent, though, was based on trying to settle this through negotiation and not through an arbitration settlement. And the way to settle something through a negotiation is to find out who's got the authority to make the decision or who the influences are. And I guess so I asked the question, Stephen, under the context of my desire to try to work with MGM to settle this during this 30-day negotiation period, as opposed to saying, well, we can't do anything because it's destined for things beyond everybody's control, and I don't believe that. I think that we can control the fate of the town's decision of the 5 people here. And I'm trying to find out if we know who the people are who can control MGMs, and if we don't know, we probably ought to be asking that. But if it is people who aren't sitting in the room, we ought to ask MGM to bring them in the room, I guess is my point.
We don't know. I think it's safe to say there may be people who are involved in the decision-making on MGM's end that are not in the room, but we don't specifically know. It's not like Jim Murin
Yeah.
or Dominic Sarno have been mentioned as, well, I got to get back to Jim. You know, those types of things have not been said. So we don't specifically know the people that are influencing the decision.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so that's just a brief overview of where we are right now. And as we stated, we're still in the middle of the negotiation period, which I believe ends, is it March 20th? March 20th.
19th or 20th. Yeah.
18th or 20th.
Right.
And if an agreement can't be made at that point in time, then we would move into the arbitration period, in which an arbitrator, I believe, has to be chosen in the beginning of April, and the process should be finished within 3 weeks, I believe, that. So we're hopeful that we'll still have a negotiated agreement. Town manager reports, anything that you wanted to elaborate on, Stephen, or any questions for
Well,
Stephen?
evidently there are questions about my 2 reports. We talked about the GPS units and DPW vehicle. I put a brief memo on what those costs would be and some information about the benefits of having them, as well as an update on the work on the crossing guard program, specifically a kind of back of the envelope count of an estimated number of students at each intersection.
Did they have a counter with them? or
No,
an
it's
estimation?
an estimation, yeah. And an anecdotal estimation, too.
'Cause sometimes I think, I mean, depending on the day in the spring, I can see those numbers, 25 kids not even being close to it. It would be more.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, we asked them to approximate it for the purpose of kind of getting an order of magnitude, but we don't go out those counts, because you're right, it can fluctuate. Rainy day, early release could make impacts on all these things, so.
And the question I have, in terms of the matrix there was the comment section. And I read those, and I agree with most of those intersections that I've driven through or seen. At the corner in Edgewood, you can sit there during any course of the morning, and within a 1 week period, you'll see cars running those red lights, and that was one of the comments from the crossing guard there. And I think we're very lucky that we have very good crossing guards that take notice of the kids, and they interact with them, so they're constantly watching out for them. But I've seen it on the grassy gutter side where, the kid's bike got hit by a car. Barely, but it got hit, and the crossing guard was out in the middle of the street trying to stop the vehicles. And have we looked at the potential for law enforcement looking at those specific things during those times? Because some of these are very specific of high speed of traffic going by, and the volume of traffic's hard to manage. I mean, that's life. But the ones that I'm concerned with is, the illegal parking on the south side of Hopkins bottlenecks traffic or something. I don't know if it's illegal, but maybe that's a perception it's illegal. But if that's a hindrance to crossing over there, I think maybe that helps alleviate some of not the crossing guard issues, but the issues at the crossing.
Alex?
So, had a couple of questions and comments. One was, we had talked about the crossing guards at a previous meeting, and the impression I gained, and I think it was based on what you had said, Stephen, was that there was one intersection that wasn't being staffed, which I took to mean the Williams and Frank Smith intersection, which I had seen on the school website. But then I look at this, and I see this Hazardville Fairway. And this is something that you and I had spoken specifically about during the fall, and because there were a large number of parents who were concerned about it and having to organize themselves to be the crossing guard, which I thought was a burden that parents didn't have to endure. And then, so I was under the impression that that had been solved. And now I see this closed. So I'm a little concerned, one, that it's closed, and two, that we didn't even hear about it, especially after you and I had spoken specifically about it in the fall. So that's number one. Do you know anything about that?
I reported that there was one intersection that was not guarded, and then one that was not guarded during the afternoon. So 1.5 intersections. The half intersection is Williams and Frank Smith, because that's not guarded in the afternoon. The Hazardville Road and Fairway, I think, is the lowest volume in terms of students. And so when you have to prioritize, it's
Okay.
traffic continued. There's a combination of factors, but it was deemed to be the lowest priority. And I know they have been working on trying to get additional people in, but it's been a struggle.
So let me ask you, the fact that you and I had a few conversations about it in the fall, why wouldn't you have discussed it, at least to the board or to me, if it was just going to be shut down?
So for what purpose?
So we could decide,
So the board
Right,
could
but-
decide what the priorities of the intersections are, evaluating all the factors that are operational decisions made by the police department.
so, I don't know, are you going to answer my question? I mean, if you're not, you can just say you're not going to answer it.
It's an operational decision
So,
based on
so in
a
other words,
variety of factors.
so you weren't, so that was a decision you made not to discuss?
I actually did not make the
with us?
decision. It was made by I believe, the crossing guard supervisor and/or the police chief.
Okay. I find that problematic.
Sorry to hear that.
With respect to the intersection at Long Meadow Street in the green, I'm looking at those numbers. I mean, I'm assuming that's Long Meadow Street in Williams?
No, there's a crosswalk almost close to where the spot on the green is.
No, I took that to mean Williams
It's between Williams, it's south of Williams, Alex. There's a crossing guard.
It's kind of a
No, I know
block.
I know what you're talking about, near the spot. So which one is the one on William Street then?
That is Williams east of the green.
Okay,
That's the main crosswalk
okay, I gotcha, okay.
For,
by the
for Center
community
School.
house.
Yeah,
by the
I mean-
community house.
Just a, all right, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that as elected members of the community, when we express concerns of constituents, it's very disappointing to sort of be blown off when those, in a way like this. It's just to have it canceled like that, when there were a substantial number of parents, and just for us not to, because what it implies is not just that the police department doesn't care and the town manager doesn't care, it also implies that the select board doesn't care. Because I think that town residents would expect a problem being brought to the attention of the select board and having addressed with the select board, with the town manager, that the select board would know what was going on. And, you know, that's the problem I've got with it.
Is there, do you want to make a suggestion of, I've reported several times now that we're having a hard time attracting and retaining crossing guards, leading to one intersection out of 20 being unguarded. Like I said, they make the decisions on which crosswalks are guarded based on level of traffic, level of students crossing, sight line, speed, things like that. Do you want to offer a suggestion for an intersection that we will move a crossing guard from to go to Hazardville Road?
Well, I mean, I guess I'm not even being provided with any information about the numbers there. So, I mean, that's one concern. So, you know, we're not in the position to do that. But I've also, and I've made this suggestion to you offline, is that you come to the select board with a reserve fund request, if necessary, to increase the salary modestly, ever so modestly, so we can attract sufficient numbers of crossing guards. This is an incredibly cheap way of ensuring the safety of our students and getting our students to school. There are so many school districts who have to pay enormous amounts of money for busing, just so that the kids are safe. We don't have to do any of that, or virtually none of it. And all we got to do is have a few crossing guards a couple hours a day. So I've made that suggestion. It hasn't, nothing's happened on it. So this is not an insoluble problem by any means. This is extremely solvable. And to this to sort of languish is very disappointing.
Any other questions? No? Any other reports?
I think that's all.
You talked about the GPS thing?
No. We're just waiting if there are any questions on it.
You were out of the room.
Pardon?
We finished the whole discussion. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
No, Richard, did you have a question?
Yeah, it's the first time I've seen the document. Was this actually sent to the select?
In the packet.
No, I mean, tonight it was.
No, it was in the packet you got Friday.
Oh, yeah, I mean Friday. Well, I
Yeah.
also got 200 and some pages Friday, too, and I unfortunately spent most of my time working here. Yeah, I've got questions, but I'm sure you don't have the answers. What's the pulse time on this recommendation?
The what?
What's the pulse time on you got a monthly charge, $29. What is the pulse interval of reading where the vehicle's at? Is it every 2 minutes, or?
I think it depends on the unit. I did not.
No, it depends on the service contract that we employ. Mike's got this at $29.95, and I've looked down through their brochure.
The bid specs aren't in there. That's more of a pros and cons type thing.
Yeah, I looked, well, the bid spec is here, it's 29, and that applies
No,
to it.
that's the price.
Well, that's a monitoring service.
The monitoring service. What scope is included with that monitoring service? I'm not as conversant with.
Good, okay. Then no sense in asking you that. That's what I was getting at.
I
didn't
don't
see
know
it.
how that. Well, I mean, is it?
Well, one system's perfectly worthless, and the other one, can be very beneficial.
So
We
do you-
talked about that before.
Do you want him to get that information on the pulse?
Yeah, I think it's very important information. One, you can have one that pulses every 2 minutes, and you can't ever tell where a vehicle's been in town. I mean, it pulses every 2 minutes. I can be up and down Captain Road, and, one of the reasons they talked about was being able to tell where the driver had been, and it really depends on what your pulse rate is.
Are there any other technical information we should try to gather?
No, I mean, these things are all pretty well the same. Other than the same general questions we had before, I don't know why we would ever just consider our vehicles down at the maintenance fleet for this. I think if we GPS this community, I think every vehicle we have should be GPSed. Every single vehicle in our fleet. I mean, you can't just isolate them and say that's where they need to be. I think if we go the whole thing. Because the equal benefits can be derived from all of our vehicles. I mean, some of the features that they pinpoint, of course, this is big fleet operations too, big trucks, it sounds like, but I don't know what specific things that they can offer from a municipal standpoint. But there's certainly, I can't find any justification to just go for DPW vehicles.
I could see DPW, and I could also see police, but I mean, the fire truck is,
Oh, no, a fire truck should be
I mean,
excluded.
the ambulance, they're either on a run or in the garage.
Right, I
mean,
agree, those main pieces like that can be excluded.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean.
Administrative vehicles, sure.
Yeah, all of those type of vehicles,
Sure.
but I think there would be a certain amount of vehicles that you'd make a decision to, like even the patrol cruisers, I think need to be GPS.
But I mean, by far, the most hours and most miles are these vehicles, and so by far, the opportunity for savings is on these. So I think this is why we're starting here.
Yeah, these savings things always amaze me because I don't know what we hope to save in this town by having GPS, but that's another discussion. I don't think anybody's clearly demonstrated any savings that can be achieved. Big fleet operations, all right-hand turns, you set the route and the computer goes, but we don't do that. We're, grab, work ticket, go. We're basically, I guess, after where the vehicles are located, am I correct?
No, that's specifically why I include that other information, because it's not just about babysitting vehicles.
Okay, well, this is another discussion then, because I can't imagine what other purpose we've got. We don't have set routes.
Right. But, well, yes, we do. We have set plowing routes.
That's only just set plowing routes,
Right.
that's in the winter, but
But, I mean, part of it is to evaluate how we go to and from places, and are we...
okay. That specifically gets back to what I was saying on the pulse rate. Because if they're pulse rating every 2 minutes,
No, that wasn't specific. You were saying that the only thing we were, okay.
Okay.
well, it's a
So-
piece of it.
It's a piece of it.
That's the backbone of it.
There, and I know this is from one of the vendors,
Yeah.
but, so of course they're gonna talk about how great these things are. But there are components to this that the system offers that I think are illustrative, not to say that we accept what Fleet Boss is saying, or even accept their equipment, but they lay out some of the other benefits because of the readings. The GPS unit, everyone knows what, I think most people are familiar with the black box from an airplane where it collects all the data. That's essentially what these units do as well. So speed, braking, idling, all of that stuff gets collected. So we know how not only do we know where the vehicles are, we know how they're being treated, how they're being used, how they're being driven. So that's why these things are.
How does
Very
it
effective.
do, so, I mean, that was one thing, I was looking, I mean, I actually spent some time trying to look at this Fleet Boss thing, and,
You weren't looking at your budget.
and, I mean, like, for example, idling, is it hooked up to the engine to?
Yeah, the car, every car is a computer that tracks all this stuff, and
Okay.
it plugs right into the computer.
So that, okay, so it's not just determining location.
No,
The-
this is
the
what I've been
particular-
saying, that
okay.
there's way more than just babysitting vehicles.
Okay, so here's one of the questions I had, though. So it says back to our budget. So I actually did pay attention to the budget. The budget, there's a line item for GPS
Mhm.
administration. It says FY13 expended $12,000. And I remember there was a
Right.
discussion about how that was taken out of the budget. Has it really been expended?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I had the same note on mine. That was
Okay.
note
So the
680.
All right, so the 12,
So did
so that was probably inaccurate then.
Mhm.
So, and I guess the second question I have, are you presenting this to us to convince us to have this line item in this coming year's budget?
It's in my recommended budget. You had asked for additional information, so you have it.
Okay. And I guess the final thing is, I mean, there are a great number of possible benefits, some of which are, that are on this, I mean, like some of the things, they just say, off-area mileage, question mark. I have no idea what that means. I mean, it's a question, not a statement. And, you know, some of the things they talk about are reducing supervisor headcount. I assume that doesn't apply. What I'd be, if the point of this is to convince the select board of the value of this, what I would be wanting to see is, you know, an argument based on, you know, the top 2 or 3 benefits of it. And I also had the question that Richard had about how frequently the signal was going to be had, because that would impact just how beneficial it would be. So, so I guess my point is, to the extent that you're looking for a decision by the select board to approve that line item, I didn't find it sufficiently convincing.
So if you could, before we get to that in the discussion of the budget, find out the pulse rate, so that will be more information to get to us. Any other question on that town manager reports?
Yeah, I have one that's
Mhm.
related to the budget. If we can clarify it with Paul Pasterzik, there, last year or the year before, we created a single line item for electricity rates, or electricity expenditure, so that the idea was you wouldn't hold a library accountable for a spike in that. But I see that it's been broken out and put back in, and I don't know if that, put back into each department. I don't know if that's GFOA issue that it goes in there per department, but can you just ask if, because I thought we had voted to do that, because that's when the year we had the discussion with the schools about taking over the electricity, and they were going to be good stewards, and it never happened, but I thought we created one line item.
If you had, then it would be one line item.
Yeah, but I see it's all back in every department.
I mean,
thought
every
this-
department has their own meter.
Right. Right, but I thought that the board at the
building.
time, or I recollect that the board voted to have one electricity line item for the town, which would hold each department harmless if there was a spike. And I just don't know if the GFO, my question is, did the GFOA negate that by saying, instead of having that one line item, we need to show it in every department again? That's all it's a curiosity question as to if we.
We can check
I
with
was, it was,
Jim.
okay, yeah. I'll
Mention it to
check.
Yeah.
Paul and see if Paul will tell us why we went with that. Like you said, Paul, could be the
'Cause that was a couple years ago,
GFOA.
yeah. No, it could
It's
be.
hard to tell.
Just asking a question.
Any other questions on the town manager reports?
No.
But
Okay.
I have
Yeah.
just a comment or question separate from that.
Sure.
We can make a select board
Mhm.
comments or select board.
Yeah, we'll add select board comments again at
Well,
the end.
whatever. Well, it's more of an issue there's an ongoing traffic issue in Long Meadow High School every morning. And you know, I believe, and I don't go to the high school, I don't have kids to go to the high school, but I drive by it, and it's got to do with a lot of different things, and we don't necessarily need to go through it here. But I know the school building committee had reviewed it, had made some changes, had made some additional changes. I think the school committee that it was brought to has, last I had heard, had chosen to not take any positive actions. I think it gets to the category of being a public safety concern, not to mention the fact that we're wasting a lot of people's times every morning when not only is Grassy Gutter backed up, but Williams and Bliss are backed up. And I would ask that our town's General Government Safety Committee take a look at that to make potential recommendations, whether it be, you know, one-way streets for a 20-minute period or half-hour period in the morning, or better enforcement, or different, whatever it is. We've got a bunch of issues, and I will tell you, Stephen, my take is that it's related to the fact that we currently have all cars come into the same entrance of the Long Meadow High School, even those that are parking. Whereas in the past, cars that parked came in off of Bliss, and only people dropping
Yeah.
people off in the Horseshoe came in off of Grassy Gutter. There have been some actions taken by having at least the administration and some people being able to come in off of Bliss, but it wasn't sufficient. There's a lot of different potential solutions, and rather than have the select board try to design it, I think, though, that we need to address that public safety issue, and would ask that you have your public safety team.
Yeah, we can, I mean, they've looked at it, I mean, we can look at it again. They've looked at it, as you know, dozens of times.
But they haven't taken, but
have-
they put
I
up
would-
signage. They put up signage, they put up,
Can I
I
just?
mean, other than redesigning,
well, if that,
But-
we're in this for 50 years. I mean, if we got a problem, and it was designed improperly with the parking lot in the middle, then let's admit it and do it now, as opposed to waiting 10 years to do it.
I just would like to have the board agree, because instead of, I know,
I hear you, okay.
that a consensus for
Before you
the,
do that, if I can make a comment, because Mark drives by it, I drive into it every morning.
did you drive into it?
I drive right into it, and there is nothing that has improved. There is usually one person from administration directing traffic in the horseshoe. The issue is, if you have two curb cuts, literally in the parking lot, two curb cuts, you can solve the problem. But everybody's punted on the issue, from the school building committee to the school committee. The issue is not having someone stop cars, because in the traffic, the foot traffic crosses the drop-off lane at 4 different points. The foot traffic, that's what the delay is. You can, and the signage that was up, most of it's gone. There's some permanent signs that says, don't drop off here, and there's people dropping people off there. The issue is, it's a design flaw. And it's a design flaw, because the former high school, that didn't happen at all. Where the foot traffic, because the foot traffic was led up to the school. And it can be easily resolved with 2 cuts into curbing. It really can. And it's a shifting of the parking lot of where the drop-off is, and you can achieve much better traffic flow and safety for the kids. Because I'm telling you, even with the reduction of the snowbanks, the issue is, parents are still dropping their kids off on the side streets because they don't want to wait in line. They're dropping them off on grassy gutter, and they're cutting the street. Kids are coming out of school and walking down grassy gutter in which there's no room to go up on the side. So you have traffic that's weaving in and out, and you're not going to change human behavior. What you can change is where you drop kids off. And that is something that we should look at, from the general government side, because it's been punted. And it's a couple curb cuts. And I'll draw it out for you, and it'll be the simplest thing in the world, and it won't cost as much as it is to having your principal and vice principal out there directing traffic in the morning. It's less costly than that, in my opinion, but it hasn't been solved. It really hasn't, and partly because you have 4 pedestrian crossings, and when you're trying to drop off, I mean, you've probably got about 500 cars going there in the morning, minimally.
Well, is there a consensus on the board to ask the safety committee to take a look at this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Richard, how do you feel?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I assume they'll be looking at any sidewalk changes, and they can look at this too. And if you could report back to us.
Who's on the safety committee?
town manager, director of public works, police chief, and town engineer.
Oh, town engineer too, okay. And how often, so is that a special meeting, or do you meet, how often do you meet?
It's an ad hoc.
It's ad hoc, yeah, as needed.
Okay, as needed, okay. And so you'll report to us and let us know in the next meeting.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
I'll
Any
bring
other
coffee.
comments since we
I
threw
had
some
one
at the end?
comment.
Well, Richard.
I finally had an opportunity to read Stephen's memo on the GPS, and it said they had a demonstration, apparently. He said
Yeah.
after reviewing demonstration and mapping.
Online.
Online? Okay. And it just said, please let me know if you have questions or would like a demonstration. Would that be an in-person demonstration?
No, it'll be online. I mean, we get sets on the website.
So you drop us the web address, can you, please? So we can take a look at it? But there was not interactive, you couldn't ask any questions?
Oh, yeah, there's a guy, a salesman on the line.
Oh, was there? Okay, so it was like a chat?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Yeah, at least I'd like the web address.
Yeah, why don't you send it to everybody on the board, so we all have the same thing?
Sure.
Thank you. All right, any other comments or questions? All right, I'm looking for a motion to move to executive
So
session
moved.
for the purpose of discussing possible tentative arbitration,
Not to go back into open meeting?
not to go back to open.
Second,
I'm looking for the motion.
I'll make that motion.
Paul?
Second.
A roll call vote, please?
Paul,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Lee,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
and Richard.
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us this evening.